the Avalon City Council meeting of Tuesday, October 6th. If we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ole Olson, would you like to lead us today?
Yes, ma'am. Please stand your heart and begin. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our last city council meeting was 3 weeks ago, so in that time, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, and she was a strong proponent of equality for all. Renee Pantoja, a longtime resident of Avalon, who passed away within the last week. And today, for us rockers, the passing of Eddie Van Halen. So we could please have some moments of silence. Please be seated. And if we could please have the roll call.
Councilmember De La Rosa? Here. Councilmember Lavelle? Here. Councilmember Ponce?
Aquí.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy? Here. Mayor Marshall?
Here.
And also present via phone is our City Attorney, Scott Campbell, and we also have our City Treasurer in the audience this evening.
Hi, Scott.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Announcements and written communications?
Just have one announcement to make, Mayor, and that is just to let voters know that sample ballots, booklets have been mailed out, as well as vote by mails. And voter registration deadlines are October 19th, and if you've postmarked it by October 19th, it will count. And then, of course, you vote in person November 3rd. We have been notified by LA County that the polling place for this year will be up at the Casino Ballroom. They had been offered the same place they did last spring for the election, and the LA County declined that because of COVID. They wanted to have more space to spread out for the voting booths, so that's why they're not going to be at the Country Club. And the ADA access, they have the ramps that a resident may be pushed up the ramps, or as well as the elevator, I guess. So they have considered everything, and that's where the new polling place will be. They will start allowing you to access the poll center starting on October 30th, and that's from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. all the way through November 2nd. And then on election day, it will be the normal voting times from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you wanted to check on your current registration, what address you're at, etc., just go to the lavote.net website.
Mike, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you know if they are looking, if LA County is looking for volunteers to help with election days or with those days? Any services?
The update I get from the county is just very generic. It's not just for Avalon, so at some points they are. So I don't know for us, Cindy.
Okay.
I could check in, see if they're still.
That'd be great. I know the government classes at the high school are looking for volunteering opportunities, and this would be a great one.
I had applied to work for the polls just because I had done city elections previously and thought it might be good this year if some of the older poll workers were concerned about working with the public to have people be able to step up and do that. I hadn't heard back from them and called on Monday, and he said, if you haven't heard back, it's because we've gotten more than enough people for your location, and would call you if someone was unable to do it, but otherwise you would be an extra person that is not needed at this time. So I don't know if they need more people just yet for that. It may be helpful in terms of directing traffic or something like that for people if they're looking for that, but actual poll workers, it sounds like they may have it covered already.
Yeah, I think that's paid, isn't it, for poll workers?
Right.
I think this was just more of a helping queue lines.
That's
or,
awesome.
you know, something that's not actually touching any of the voting part of it, but something I'd love to see our youth get involved in.
Yeah, for sure.
In doing this. And maybe you're right, traffic or pointing people.
Yeah. We were talking also, and I know with AD accessibility, if there's a possibility of having one of the machines on the ground level, either in the theater or in the foyer of one of the two rampways, that may be better than having people have to be pushed up. There's some concerns with the elevator and proximity and just the fact that it hasn't been used as much over the past few months, that there may be some concerns there. So I don't know if that's something that can be discussed and approached with them when you talk to them next as well.
Denise, can you repeat the times, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you repeat the times,
Oh, certainly.
please?
October 30th through November 2nd, the times are 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then on Election Day itself, it's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Thank you.
And I have no written communication.
Okay. And council and people out there in television land, you will see that we've changed the order of the agenda, so department head reports and council reports and those things will be done at the end of the meeting because we wanted to get into the budget.
And also, apparently, we are not live right now. That's probably for Jordan.
Did somebody text you or something?
Cables have an issue that we're working on right now, everything else is streaming.
Okay.
No!
Okay. So let's proceed, right?
Okay. We're going to have Matt Baker, our finance director, come up and present our budget. We are very appreciative of the council and the public for being patient as we have worked our way into reducing the budget amounts, and some of it has been very fruitful and some of it has not. So I'm going to let Matt take it away. He's got a lot of details for us.
Thank you, Matt.
So just as a recap or a refresh of what our budget priorities need to be going into this year, first is that we need to be able to make sure we can provide that basic level of service to ensure public health and safety. We don't necessarily have the luxury of reducing the number of sheriffs or firefighters just because the number of visitors are fewer this year, and so we need to make sure that we are providing those levels of services or care to the community. The next on the list is to minimize any required draws on reserves or outside borrowing. The proposed budget does spend the majority of our reserves in this current fiscal year. That said, that would strain next year's budget even if visitor-driven revenues would return to near normal. So what we need to be doing is, even if we were to adopt this budget, we still need to continue to look for new revenue sources as well as opportunities for reductions as they arise. The third on the list would be to repay any debt or restore reserves to pre-COVID levels. This is going to take discipline, not just in 1 year, but this is going to be a multi-year approach. And if we follow steps 1, 2, and 3 first, then it will be years before we restore our services to the levels we enjoyed before COVID. So again, this next slide is similar to ones that I've presented on before. The breakdown is just really showing the significance of the general fund and the harbor fund relative to other funds. As you can see, the expenditures in green are outpacing the blue revenues for this current budget year. If you look to the columns on the right, what I've done here is taken general fund revenues from the fiscal year 20 budget compared to the proposed 21 budget. The color in green you can see are the non-visitor dependent revenues, and you can see those have largely remained the same. However, with TOT, sales tax, and ad tax anticipated to be down significantly, we are looking at operating revenues in the general fund down of about $2.5 million. And this is after revisions to the revenue estimates that you saw last time. And I have a slide coming up to go into that in more detail. Similarly, in the harbor fund, you'll see that operating revenues are down over $3 million. You can see that the changes, I've since grouped the nightly moorings with the non-visitor dependent based on activity observed in July, August, September. Revenues for nightly moorings have been near normal, but as you can see, without any cruise ship wharfage in this year's budget, as well as with cross-channel wharfage at a fraction of prior years, we are looking at $3 million less in revenue. And I know when we look in the harbor, and we're grateful for all the boaters that have come out, but the nightly mooring revenues for September, I'm very happy to report, are up $40,000 from the same month last year. However, cross-channel and cruise ship wharfage is down over 250,000. So it's important to kind of look at all the numbers when, determining how we're doing as a harbor. So this is a breakdown of how I came up with the revenue estimates for the visitor-driven revenues. What I did is I tried to look at prior year month-to-month numbers and set a target that I felt was realistic given the actual activity observed in July and August, as well as reports from September. So for TOT and hotels, July we observed, when I came up with the budget estimate, about 67% of normal. We've had a few trickle in, and as what you can see is through October 5th, we've actually had 21,000 more than the number that I used in the budget. Similarly with August, I used 85% of normal as my TOT figure. We've actually exceeded that number for the month of August, and so what that is really doing is it's giving us some cushion as we go into the later months where we have revenue estimates of 65 and then 50% for the winter of normal. Again, anything that we're going over what I had budgeted, all this would do was lessen the amount of required draws on reserves. Even if all those months were to be 100%, we still would be looking at draws on reserves. So that's still something to keep in mind, that if we can beat those numbers, that is great, but it really doesn't change the strategy, and that's minimize draws on reserves for this year. So this is a breakdown of the budget that was adopted last year. You can see the operating revenues were just over 10 million. And then after the operating expenditures, as well as capital outlays and transfers out, we had budgeted to draw on fund balance or draw on reserves of almost $1 million. Revenues were actually outpacing our budget last year, which helped offset some of the lost revenue that happened during the last quarter. However, we still had draws on reserves in fiscal year 20 of almost $1 million. And then in the current budget as proposed, if our revenues just meet those target estimates that I discussed before, we would still be drawing $1.8 million on the general fund's reserves in order to operate during the fiscal year. Again, the general fund is entering the year with about $4 million in available reserves, but if there's any other fund with a deficit or having to draw on reserves that they don't have available, the general fund would need to be able to either loan or transfer funds to those funds. So what I've done here is provided a breakdown of operating expenditures in the current year's budget by department. As you can see, one of the challenges in reducing our operating expenditures is half our operating expenditures relate to either law enforcement or a fire department, public safety items. We have entered negotiations with the county or discussions to try to get that contract reduced, but as of right now, we have not come to any agreement, so the full contract amount is included in the budget. So to break down the contract services, 90% of the contract services in the general fund are either the county sheriff's contract, the chamber's TOT, which is 22% of whatever revenue we actually bring in, TOT revenue that is, and then the hospital sales tax, which is a pass-through sales tax, so any increase or decrease there is offset by the amount passed through. So again, that's 90% of the contract spend in the general fund are those three. The others relate to our wastewater, or our stormwater, excuse me. And then the other contracts include planning's legal, some of the reports that planning does, the LCP, and things of that nature, as well as our successor agency contract with RSGs in that other contract category. Maintenance and operations, again, half of our maintenance and operations expenditures in the general fund relate to utilities and rent. Supplies primarily are in either the fire department for safety supplies, ambulance supplies, things of that nature, as well as recreation, but those recreation supplies are offset by program revenues. Training and travel makes up 2%, and miscellaneous other, which includes various things, including communications, advertising, special department expenses, things of those nature make up that miscellaneous category.
I'm sorry, so when you're talking about this percentage, this is what the percentages would be going forward this year?
That is correct. That is what is in this proposed budget. So 34% of our general fund operating expenditures relate to labor. 5% are those maintenance and operating. 27% relate to those contract services, again, primarily the sheriff's contract, TOT, and the hospital.
So the only two that might change would be the chamber TOT or the hospital sales tax based on what happens.
Right.
Yeah, because that's...
But there would be a revenue offset, so there wouldn't be,
I mean, but that could be a higher or a lower number depending on
Right.
visitors. Okay. It's not like automatically the hospital's going to get $243,000. The chamber's automatically going to get $841,000.
no, it's all based, it's tied to a revenue. So if TOT outpaces my projections, the chamber's allocation would match what we actually collect.
Okay.
So what I'm hoping to achieve with this slide is to show why we really looked at labor as an area to reduce operating expenditures. Given 90% of our contract services are either the sheriff, the chamber, or the hospital, as well as half our maintenance and operating expenditures are utilities and rent, and maintenance expenditures only make up 5% of the general fund's total spend. That's why we really had to focus on where we could find savings in labor. As well as capital outlay, or the only real change in capital outlays here is from the last time we presented is the Five Corners. I updated the presentation. We are going to be using SB1 funds, so that's our road maintenance gas tax, as the local match for the Five Corners pedestrian improvement, and that's why even though we have planned expenditures at $261,000, offset by grants of $203,000. Why we don't have any drawn reserves is because we're going to be using that RMRA as our local match.
And where would that money have gone before if we were using it for here?
That would have gone to pothole repairs, annual street maintenance.
Okay.
So there is a plan to look at our agreements we have with utilities and other people that have worked on the street, and to try to collect and use those funds for road maintenance type repairs for the year.
Okay.
So similarly with the harbor, and I put labor towards the end, so we'll go to the harbor next. This is in the last year's budget. We had a planned draw of about $1 million. While the majority of that drawn reserves was planned related to capital, namely the mole project, we did have draws on reserves for both harbor operations and the fuel dock as well. The loss of the fourth quarter ended with about $2 million in draws on reserves in the harbor. So we didn't have the revenues outpacing estimates like we did in the general fund. So the loss of the fourth quarter revenues really impacted the harbor's reserve level. So in the current budget, we see revenues down from $9 million in last year's budget to $5.5 million in this year's. Again, primarily that's due to loss of cruise ship wharfage of $800,000, and then loss of cross-channel wharfage of around $2 million. So with the budget as proposed, we would be spending $2.3 million more than we're bringing in the harbor. The harbor does not have $2.3 million in available reserves, so if we were to adopt this budget, we will be coming back with an inter-fund loan from the general fund to the harbor to offset those, to make up that loss. Again, the general fund has about $4 million in available reserves, with $1.8 to be spent on general fund operations this year, with the harbor needing an additional $2 million because it began the year with about $400,000 in reserves.
That wasn't so good. That wasn't good news. Okay, keep going.
So again, this is a breakdown of operating expenditures by department in the current fiscal year 21 budget. What I was hoping to show from this slide is we really tried to find the savings across all departments, whether that's admin, public works, harbor patrol, harbor maintenance. And so that's kind of what we're going to try to show with that slide there. Similarly to the general fund, we looked at contract services and maintenance and operations for additional opportunities to reduce expenditures. Similar to the general fund, over half of our contract services relate to county fire, and that's for lifeguard and paramedic services. Waterfront trash contract was reduced from $200,000 to $127,000. Restroom maintenance, which also includes supplies, reduced from $250,000 to $160,000. Shoreboat contract, we weren't able to come up with a reduction that worked for all parties, so that remains unchanged at $239,000. And then other contract services was primarily net moorings as well as legal in the harbor, makes up the majority of that $63,000. Maintenance and operations, similar to the general fund, about half of it's utilities and rent. Supplies is primarily fuel charges at the fuel dock, that's why that number is so large. Miscellaneous includes permitting and testing at the fuel dock, as well as additional insurance in the harbor and additional insurance at the fuel dock. Capital outlays in the harbor, the majority of the drawn reserves in the harbor relates to the Mole Phase 1. So we had a grant funding of $2.4 million related to construction. So all of the spend that we've had for this budget year, fiscal year 21, did not have any grant match available. So it's been entirely from reserves from the harbor and then from the general fund. Other non-grant funded projects include annual costs for patrol boats. That's primarily replacing of engines, new paint, things of that nature, as well as an end float rehabilitation. So that's a scaled down version of what was originally planned in the fiscal year 20. This is a breakdown of the total project spend for Mole Phase 1. So we had a budget for project engineering of $499,000 with $423,000 spent to date. Project construction, the construction budget was awarded at $3.25 million, with the supplemental alternative one approved in June of an additional $553,000 for a total construction budget of $3.8 million. To date, we have spent $3.6 million, and that's for activity-based, or activity through July. The remaining budget is $136,000 with $602,000 in materials on hand, and Bob can explain it better than I can, but essentially you pay for the materials in advance so they can work on those materials, so that way the contractor isn't out. You essentially pay in advance for the materials for them to do the work. So while there's $130,000 left in budget, they also have $600,000 in materials on hand that essentially we've already paid for that work. That work just hasn't been completed, and Bob can speak to that in more detail once I get through the presentation.
But is that part of the budget that we've already paid? That's
right. That
$600,000?
$600,000 is included in that 3.666.
Okay.
Just as a reminder, I did include the other bids. So we awarded it to the lowest responsible bidder. The next bidder was $3.5 million, with all the other bidders over $1 million more than the lowest responsible bidder. So internal services, similar. What I was hoping to show with this is that across various departments for internal services, the level of reductions was comparable to the cuts made to general fund as well as the harbor. With the exception of insurance, the $414,000 represents our general liability insurance at the city, and the $240,000 represents additional legal costs for various active litigations. So as a breakdown to scale, the general admin, which would include IT, finance, the city manager's office, elected officials, makes up about 68% of our internal fund, our internal service fund, with 12% related to vehicle maintenance and 20% related to insurance. Again, the majority of the spend in those funds relates to labor, and that's why labor was such a focus in our reductions. With about a quarter of the spend related to contract services and the other quarter related to maintenance and operations. So within maintenance and operations, the majority relates to our general liability insurance, just over $400,000. The rent for the garage, as well as lease agreements for copiers and other city property, makes up another 10%. With supplies, communications, training, membership, advertising, election expenses, and other maintenance, making 21% or $180,000. Similarly, with contract services, the majority of contract services are either our city attorney retainer or the other current litigation attorney fees. IT consulting includes our IT consultant, as well as annual renewal for various software charges. So 75% of that reflects the consultant, and 25% reflects the annual service charges for Windows and things of that nature. Finance service charges includes our annual financial statement audit, our payroll software, our medical billing for our ambulance, as well as our budgeting software. So this is a breakdown of our last year's budget related to labor. So you can see last year we had 83.7 full-time equivalents. This doesn't match up with the funds. I broke this down by department since we have some departments spanning multiple funds. For example, a harbor or a public works employee may have half his time charged to the harbor and half to the general fund. I thought it made more sense to provide labor based on department. So you can see payroll was just shy of 7 million with a total labor-related spend in last year's budget of 10.8 million. If we look at the current proposed budget, our full-time equivalent headcount is 61.9 employees, down from 83.7, with a total spend of 8.7 million. Just to provide some additional clarification in the fixed labor-related costs, insurance relates to our retiree OPEB benefits that we pay on a pay-as-you-go system. The employer taxes relate to state unemployment insurance. Retirement is our unfunded accrued liability, and so for budget purposes, we divide that up amongst the funds. I thought it would be easier to show that as a separate item. That number increased 8% from the prior budget year. So as you can see, unfunded pension liability pre-COVID, or in last year's budget, was almost 10%. And this year, our unfunded pension liability is over 10% of our entire labor-related spend. That amount reflects activity already performed and incurred. So even if we lowered our payroll, by another 2 million, there would be no change to that number in the current budget year. The 246,000 is our annual workers' comp, which decreased this year because of our lower headcount.
And question on the insurance, it went from last year it was $1,222,000, and now, and the projection of the under $1 million is based on the projections of changing the health insurance going forward.
So it's a combination of two things. One, if we had a full-time position that was eliminated or not filled, there would be savings that way. We also did lower the amount covered by the city. We lowered the cap amount, and that also created some additional savings in this budget. So then this last slide here for labor-related shows it in terms of savings by department, by category. So you can see the 21.8 full-time employee reduction, how it was spread across departments. So while we have had a cap, or we have not had any step increases or longevity increases, if an employee, say, had a step increase back in February of 2020, he would have only been reflected in last year's budget as getting that increase in February, but it would be in effect for the entirety of this year, and that's how you can have a situation where a department's payroll costs actually increased in this year's budget.
The cutoff for that was on March 23rd. Effective that date, there was no step increases, no longevity.
So as you can see, a lot of our savings in the budget came from labor. The challenge obviously was balancing reductions with still being able to provide that basic level of service to the community. So the next few slides are kind of a breakdown of our harbor's operating costs. So it was asked what additional opportunities would there be to raise revenues or raise fees to revenues. And what I was hoping to show just by these slides is to show that obviously our revenues aren't covering our operating costs, particularly in the harbor. Just kind of demonstrate that in case anyone had any questions why we would be looking potentially to increase rates. It's because in the harbor fund in particular, being an enterprise fund, the users of the harbor should be the ones that pay for the cost to operate the harbor. And so what I'm hoping to demonstrate in the next few slides is that if council so chose, there would be justification to increase those rates to cover those operating costs. So what I have here, and apologize, it's pretty small and it's a lot of numbers, but it's a breakdown of our spend in fiscal year 19 in the Harbor Operating Fund, so that's Fund 103. So our operating revenues in the Harbor Operating Fund were $6.4 million. Then going down below, it's a breakdown of all of our labor costs, maintenance and operations costs, contract service costs, and internal service costs for the harbor. What you can see is even in a pre-COVID year, in fiscal year 19, we spent $200,000 more than we brought in harbor operating revenues. So that's Fund 103. One of the challenges in general with managing the harbor from a finance perspective is half our revenues come from cross-channel carriers as well as cruise ships, and the amount we collect is a fixed amount per passenger, per visitor. And so if we aren't increasing our passenger count by 3% a year, it's hard when our operating costs go up by 3 to 5% a year to be able to build on those reserves. And so that's one of the challenges with the harbor, operating it as we have, where we are spending nearly everything we bring in. We're really reliant on visitor growth of 3% or more, since the amount we bring in is tied to the individual visitor. And so, once we get through COVID, I think a good practice would be to make sure whatever number we're setting it at a level to where we're confident we can be adding to our reserves, and not necessarily at a level where we need 30% of growth just to make it through the year. So what I did is looked at the 19 actuals, and I tried to come up with what percentage relates to cross-channel and cruise ship wharfage versus what percentage relates to all the other activities that go on in the harbor. So for example, admin time or admin labor costs. I assume 70% of the time the harbor master, assistant harbor master, or admin assistant would spend in the harbor would be managing tasks not related to cross-channel or cruise ships. Similarly with patrol, I asked the harbor for their input on how much of the patrol officer's time is spent dealing with or managing cross-channel or cruise ship passengers, and the answer I got was very little, so I used 90% as the assumption there. Maintenance, including sanitation in the harbor, I split 50-50. And then public works, where I used 5%, is pre-COVID, our nightly boating visitors made up about 5% of our visiting population. So I assigned 5% to public works for that purpose. Kind of using a similar logic going down for credit card fees and rent, I assigned 100% since we don't pay any rent for the Mole location. Patrol boat fuel, water insurance, I charged 90% since 90% of patrol activities didn't relate to cross-channel or cruise ship. And kind of going down the list, what I found is that for the $200,000 that we lost in harbor operations, it really, assuming you accept the breakdowns, it to me looks like that the loss is really attributable not to cross-channel and cruise ship not pulling their weight, but all the other harbor revenues not covering the cost to provide the services for those.
Matt, can you just break down utilities a little bit more? What utilities specifically does that mean?
So utilities, primarily about 3/4 of that, or about 300,000, relates to sewer and saltwater. So we have an annual charge of the harbor for its portion of sewer and saltwater. I want to say it's around 200,000 for sewer and 80,000 or so for saltwater. So if the harbor pays between sewer, saltwater, power at the mole, power at the pier, if they pay 430,000, I said assume 5% of it's related to the non-cross-channel or cruise ship visitor, because 95% of our visitors pre-COVID in 19 related to came via either the cross-channel or the cruise ship. So if we spent 430,000 on utilities in fiscal year 19, I only charged 21,500 to the non-cross-channel or cruise ship visitor, if you will.
Okay, and then it's not quite on here, but it might be on a subsequent slide. Have you taken into consideration the revenues for when the cruise ships do start coming back in March?
In this year's budget, we don't have any monies in there for cross-channel wharfage. Kind of our viewpoint is anything we have would be a benefit, which would mean less required draws on reserves. But just given uncertainty within the industry and the limited number of confirmed bookings we do have some confirmed bookings beginning in spring of 21. But to come up with a number that we felt confident we could hit, we decided not to include any cruise ship wharfage in this current year's budget.
Because we still don't know how many guests they'll have on the cruise ships if they do start coming. So
Right.
kind of a hard thing to nail down.
And how I would view it as any cruise ship we get in, that would, in theory, just be less we would have to rely on reserves. So, if we had multiple cruise ships a week again in the spring, I would probably be one of the happiest guys on the island. But until they come, I'm not really counting on it.
So it sounds as though there have been some conversations with some of the cruise ship industries. Is there discussion about size of ships? What has been discussed? Because I know there was a concern if they've got a 5,000 passenger ship, that might not be amenable to Avalon. So what?
I think the largest ship, say for 2022, Mayor, that we have on the book, it's like a 3,200 passenger one.
Oh, okay.
that I can remember off the top of my
Oh,
head. We
okay.
have 2 Disney ships that were supposed to come in March of this
Right.
of 2021, sorry. I am doubtful that that will happen.
Yeah.
And then we have 4 separate ships, I believe, in April, and I'm doubtful those will happen also,
Yeah.
so.
But those were the mega ships.
The requests that we're getting now are for 2022 that I'm seeing.
Okay.
And then, like I said, they're not gonna be at capacity.
Right,
So-
right. Right, I hear what you're saying. Because I know the community's going to start to wonder, so, okay.
So my understanding is the 2 ships that previously visited Avalon are no longer owned by Carnival, but they do have 1 ship with a slightly larger capacity currently scheduled, I believe, twice in April to come to Avalon, but again, that things can change. And that ship's capacity, I want to say, is around 3,200, but we don't know what the new capacity would be if there's CDC restrictions on number of passengers or things of that nature.
Okay. Good.
So what the next slide is just looking at it using fiscal year 21 numbers. The only other major change is because we've had no cruise ship visitors and significantly fewer cross-channel visitors. The harbor's percentage of visitor population in fiscal year 20 is essentially doubled, so they represent about 10% of all visitors coming to the island, whereas pre-COVID they represented closer to 5%. Again, this is just showing that of the 1.6 million that Fund 103 is spending more than it's bringing in, about 450,000 or 500,000 of that loss is not related to cross-channel or cruise ship. So again, the majority of the loss is the loss from cross-channel and cruise ship, but even non-cross-channel cruise ship revenues are projected to not pull their weight, if you will. Another thing that was brought up, so I just wanted to share this information. This relates to nightly mooring rate comparisons. So it was asked what kind of an impact would changing the winter season rate would have on revenue. So what I tried to do here is I looked at the 3 most recent years where we had a winter rate. By winter rate, I mean buy 2, get 5 nights free, which typically goes from October 15th to Palm Sunday. So fiscal year 17, 18, and 20 were the years where we had the winter rate. Fiscal year 19 was the year we did not have the winter rate. So what I did is I compared the 3-year average for the years we did have the rate to the year we eliminated the rate. And what really, my main takeaway from this is just how weather dependent the harbor is in the winter months. What you can see is that in December of 17 and January of 18, the nightly mooring rates exceeded the winter where we had the buy 2 and get 5 free eliminated, and it beat it considerably. So much so that for December, January, and February, the 3-year average was actually higher the years we didn't have the buy 2, get 5 free. And I'm not saying that would happen this year. All I'm saying is that weather is a huge factor in determining how good our nightly mooring rates can be. I was hoping it would show differently, but kind of the conclusion I took away is that, you could have February of 2017, we had nightly moorings rates of 22,000. Fiscal year 20, we doubled that, or more than doubled it, with nightly mooring rates of 46,000. And both those have the same buy 2, get 5 free. It just shows how much of a difference nice weather makes for our harbor mooring rates. Again, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't go that way. I'm just saying a lot of how we do in the harbor is really going to come down to what kind of weather we can expect. If we have good weather and we change the fee, obviously there's opportunities for additional revenue, but if we change the fee and the weather's bad, there may really have a minimal visitor impact, if you will. So that is all I have prepared, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
So just kind of a couple overall questions, like attorney's fees, because you put them all over into everything. Is there an overall reduction proposed for this next year?
There is, and I'd have to confirm it, but I believe it's down from 440 last year to 375 this year, and that's only for BBK's city attorney retainer. So if other litigation costs, if you take those out and just look at BBK's legal fees, I believe it's down from either 425 or 440 last year to 375 this year.
Sometimes those kind of comparisons are easier for us to see. You know, it's just this and this. So, and then the IT services, has that been reduced at all?
It has slightly. I believe last year it was 80,000. I can confirm that. But.
Because at one place you had IT, it was 100 and something, but it was...
So it was 105,000 in this year's budget, or 103,000. But 25,000 of that relates to software licensing costs, and so we would have to pay those costs regardless.
Okay.
But I can pull up.
Mayor, I'd like to say something about the legal fees, is that we have been very diligent in reducing those fees, working along with Scott, and by not calling them often, and he has greatly helped us in helping reduce that.
Yeah, no, I do understand.
We could have put a lower number in, but I was hesitant to do that because I wanted to make sure that if something comes up, that I have a certain amount in the budget.
No, exactly.
But also the legal fees are not just BB&K.
Right.
It's litigation, it's,
But he said that this 375 was BBK, and then there's some other legal costs.
And that's spread through all the departments.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
We always pick on BB&K, but our legal fees are not only BB&K. We have to engage other legal services for employee-related things, some insurance things that we don't.
Since I have it pulled up, we had in the budget last year 447. This year we have 375, but our spend year to date with BB&K was 362,000 last year. So, you know, we set the number at 1, which is reduced from last year, but still a number we feel confident we can get under.
Excellent. And
This is Scott. If I could just say, the run rate so far this year has been substantially less than the budget. We're really cutting and doing what we can to be a partner with the city and keeping your costs down.
I understand, and that's much appreciated, Scott. So, do you have somewhere in their election costs? Because you hadn't even gotten a bill yet, right?
We did get a bill, Annie, oh boy, and I just went totally blank on how, it was way less than...
We were thinking?
Yes.
Okay, so
Way less.
So we've got that covered, and
Yes.
then, okay, excellent. That was one of my questions. Go ahead. Any other questions, just right off the top?
I just want to confirm, one of Denise's was really just a confirmation. I'd love to see us talk a little bit about the Avalon Transit contract.
We will be bringing that back at the next city council meeting for you to consider if we should go out for RFP or continue on. And we do have a proposal to bring to you about reducing what we're going to be offering.
And just to provide a little, I guess, a preview for the next meeting's discussion, why we're looking at changing the level of service level there is how the majority of our transit funds are funded is through our local return. So that's essentially a sales tax that the county receives and then distributes to transit agencies and cities that, like Avalon, that have a transit program. Our estimated local return revenues are anticipated to be down over 10%. So and that's based on the budget the county provided us. But if we don't make any changes to the services provided, the operating costs would go up by about 3%. But that's based on the CPI and our contract with our transit provider. But the other challenge is our ridership numbers have been down significantly, so our fare box revenue have also been impacted. And so the 10% decrease in local returns on top of, the less fare revenue has led to the cost to operate it kind of exceed even in prior years by about 100,000. So it'd require 100,000 more of general fund subsidy than we had in prior year's budget. Why it wasn't so apparent maybe in the budget is we did end our taxi subsidy program, which did have some savings to the transit fund, and so that offset some of the additional losses from our kind of our land transit and dial-a-ride costs. But at the next meeting, I'll have a more detailed presentation related to transit.
So the sales tax that the city gets, we just put that directly into the general fund? We don't divide that like the harbor, because some of those people that are on the boats are...
Sales tax is a general fund revenue. We can spend it, how we see fit and prudent, but generally we assigned 100% of it to our general fund.
Right.
That gives you the most flexibility as far as how you can spend it.
Right.
And what about, I noticed that we, and Denise, I'm sorry, when I was going through my questions earlier, I didn't fly upon this one, but the Yellow Jacket and pest control, it looks like you've negotiated that out of this year's.
The Yellow Jacket, not the honeybee one that I hear is in town, but the Yellow Jacket contract we eliminated, and it will be passed over into the Public Works Department.
Oh, okay, so there is going to be some mitigation.
The Yellow Jacket one,
Okay,
yes.
okay, great.
But what did you say about the honeybees? I'm sorry.
I'm looking into, I think it was Councilmember Lavelle brought it up to me today all along Front Street about a bee problem.
It is out of control.
And are they honeybees? They're not Yellow Jackets, correct?
They're
They are
honeybees.
honeybees, yeah.
They're all in the trash. So some guy contacted me that, I don't know if he contacted anybody else, and he was saying that our local bees are Met bees, M-E-T bees, and he's from Bakersfield or somewhere, and he's got this big abatement company. And I asked him if he had any great ideas to call back, and he hasn't, or he hasn't texted back. But the question is kind of still, are these Avalon bees, or are they other bees? Because, I mean, what we heard was that because we've had so much rain in the last couple of years, that everything, the flora and fauna, everything's growing, and that's why the bees. But I don't know if that is the normal bee that we would normally have. So, I don't know. I mean, in terms of this, everybody says, well, they're just a honeybee. Well, are all bees honeybees and worth something in the environment? I don't know. But they are kind of an annoyance. And maybe by next year, if we're open, it's not going to be a problem. Be a problem.
I think they're a heat-related issue as well. We were talking about them before the meeting and found that the same issue had happened previously, where we had gone out to try to actually have someone come and look at doing some mitigation, and then the timing of it was right around the same time as this year, where it's extremely hot, and then it cools down for the winter, and the bee problem goes away.
Yeah.
I don't know that the heat is following that trend this year. It doesn't seem to be quite yet, and it's been significantly hotter for a straight level of time, so.
But the last few days I've been on the beach, and people are still eating, and they weren't as bad the last couple of days as it's cooling, so, yeah. So maybe it's something we don't have to start addressing until a little later on as well.
But perhaps we can look at it for the following year's budget to have something that addresses it
Right.
earlier in the season, so we have something in place already.
Yeah. Introduce some kind of a bird, that eats bees, right? Something like that. Or bring over some bears that go after honey. Okay. So. Please go.
Okay.
I've not done either.
I don't recall receiving an update in the last couple of months where we are with a contractor that was looking into the TOT and the transient rentals, that possibly the Airbnbs and VRBOs that weren't reporting.
So we did previously, and this was, I think, in fiscal year 19's budget, contract with Host Compliance. What that software did is it scanned Airbnbs and VRBOs to identify out of compliant properties. One of the challenges with that was making sure our records were such that we could rely on anything they flagged. We did identify not a ton of properties, but I want to say a half dozen or so, and we've worked to get them into compliance. It was more of an effort or an issue of maybe not paying or paying every month. And so the letter was responsive for several of them where we're now collecting regularly from them. I don't believe we had anything specific for TOT in the 2020 budget, but I do think that TOT is an area where you kind of get the best bang for your buck as far as any compliance type activities. We don't have anything in the budget related to them, but it would be my goal or expectation if we wanted to pursue a project like that the additional revenues gained would offset any cost for acquiring a service. So if that's something you'd like me to look into, that's something we can definitely look into. But it's right now, there's nothing specifically earmarked in the budget. We ended up canceling our contract with Host Compliance, I believe, last year.
We didn't renew it, and I will say that the planning department, along with the finance, had sent many letters out to the homes that we identified with the CUPs or thought they did. We got back TOT, ones that said they no longer had a CUP, and so they really cleaned that up. So they were able to, present to the Planning Commission exactly what the count was on what they had. And I want to say that they closed that loop. I can verify that for you.
Oh, that's great, okay.
I just have a feeling that there's a lot out there, unless people that come, I guess some people can, when I contact people on the street, talk to them, they go, oh, I'm VRBO. I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going through the VRBO system and don't have a CUP. Is that correct? Or they can advertise their business through VRBO and
Right.
through like CIVR and then still pay us.
Right, so there are individually managed properties, and my guess is those homeowners use an Airbnb or VRBO site to book their rentals. But we do collect outside of CIVR and outside of Hamilton Cove and Hunt and our property management companies. We probably collect 70 a month, 70 different individual reporters a month reporting. And so when we did the last evaluation of our short-term rentals, I want to say we had about 300 some CUPs, and we had about 300 some people reporting every year at least one TOT payment. But that being said, I think audits have proven to be valuable exercises, and we haven't really done we've done a short-term compliance or a short-term rental compliance, making sure they had the CUP and that they had the business license, but we really haven't done one that focuses on are they paying the full amount. And so if we wanted to direct, that might be a good target. Just because we're collecting doesn't necessarily mean we're collecting the full and proper amount, so.
Yeah, I imagine you're not, because just as we talked about, somebody could go through PayPal versus da-da-da-da-da, and we would never know if they could have two sets of books. So and then we had the discussion before, and this was before the new council, paying to maintain a CUP, and was the answer, other than just handing you $12 a year, saying I rented it one night for $100, did we ever come up with any way that to maintain that CUP, they would have to contribute something more than $12?
I don't think we ever came to a resolution on that, Mayor.
Okay.
I can talk on that. The Planning Commission looked at that issue and decided not to pursue that. What they have done is that will be coming to you at the next meeting. At their next meeting is an ordinance changing CUPs from CUPs to licenses and restructuring how CUPs are granted, and then as well as we have enforcement actions for those people that have not used their CUPs, but we've held off on those for the time being. But
can there be some kind of cap that at least has to be more than $12 to maintain it?
the Planning Commission looked at that, and that was not in their recommendation.
Okay. But it's something we can
to the
just...
council. So.
What I can...
But when we bring it to the council, you can consider that.
Okay.
And I will add that the majority pay more than $12, so I can try to give you a breakdown and more specifics as to kind of what the typical average per property spend is, but there are some that pay a nominal amount each year.
Right,
It's fair.
right, okay. And I know it's probably the fee that we assign has to be traceable to what it costs to take care of that, right, Denise?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, okay.
Scott, in the revised ordinance that's coming to the council, does it also address the sunset clause of some sort on grandfathering it, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, really? Awesome. Great. That is moving forward.
Yeah. We will explain that basically we are ending grandfathering of CUPs in Avalon. That will they will still be able to be sold once, but only once, and then they disappear after that. So that is in the ordinance that's coming to you for consideration.
Oh, you're not talking about the grandfathers that people aren't doing anything with, the ones that are just put on hold? Because a lot
We
of
are
people...
talking about the fact that right now CUPs run forever, and the proposed ordinance says that they stop running forever, and that if you have a CUP and you sell your property, that CUP goes to the person that purchases the property, but after that, if they sell the property again, they lose the CUP and they have to come in through the Planning Commission to get a license for a CUP, which only goes with them and no longer runs with the land.
Right, and we already approved that, so I don't know why that hasn't been happening. But I
No,
could...
it hasn't been passed by the council yet.
I know, we sure talked about it and all agreed on it though, right?
There was some discussion that Planning Commission needed some additional decision points. You guys provided feedback at City Council back in March, and then it needed to go back to Planning Commission, basically to pass the recommendation and the resolution over, and then that's happening this month. It got delayed because of COVID, unfortunately. We're back on track. Once Planning Commission looks at that at this next meeting, it'll go to City Council in the meeting in November for your approval.
But in terms of the numbers of CUPs where people have decided not to rent again, they just leave it as their personal home and come a few weeks, come whenever they want, there's nothing we can do about those people that have those CUPs and that are not using them at all, but it looks like it's, because if we ever wanted to talk about congestion, what's that word?
Saturation?
Saturation. Those people are included on the saturation, but nothing's really happening to the place. So it's not fair to call it saturated if nobody's, go ahead.
If I can talk on that, we have started the procedures for people that have CUPs that have not used them. We have sent letters out to them saying that they have to abandon them, or we can institute proceedings against them. And so we are ready to go with those, but again, because each one of those will involve a public hearing, we put those on hold during COVID. I think there's about 18 of them that we can proceed with in terms of having a hearing before the Planning Commission to cancel those 18 CUPs for non-use.
Okay, thanks. I didn't mean to belabor that, but thanks for bringing that up, Cindy. And do you have some more things?
Nope, that's it for me.
Councilwoman?
I did want to ask about, I know that the number for the shore boats wasn't changed. Is that going to be changed? Are you guys going to have discussions on that?
So we did meet with the shoreboat provider. They did provide us with a couple of alternatives that they proposed that would result in savings to the city. One of them would involve shutting down the shoreboat from, I believe, mid-November to mid-March in exchange for $50,000 reduction to the shoreboat. For that one, I felt that not having the shoreboat subsidy really exists is to provide the service during the months where visitor demand wouldn't necessarily make it a viable business. And so I really didn't like the idea of having no shoreboat available for the 4 or 5 month period that was proposed. And the other proposal involved a combination of increasing the shoreboat rate that the user still pays when they get on the shoreboat, as well as reducing the hours for a savings of $40,000. And again, it was my recommendation to Denise that the 40,000 in savings wasn't equal to the added cost placed on the shoreboat user, as well as the reduction in hours available of the shoreboat. So given those alternatives, I felt the best option of the three was keeping the contract as it was. Again, my real takeaway is that we really subsidize the shoreboat for those winter months, whereas in the summer months where the visitor demand is such that you wouldn't necessarily need to subsidize that service. So I really wanted to make sure that if we were reducing the service, the savings in the city was significant, and I understand how the provider came up with those numbers. I just felt that of the options, the better option was not reducing, given those three options.
And so when we met with them a couple times to see if we could come to an agreement, that would have come to you anyway, because it would be affecting the quality and of how much they're serving the public. And we just couldn't come to an agreement, so.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was on my list to discuss as well. I think that I would like you to try to go back to the drawing board on that. I mean, we have cut everybody else's contract, and 50%, 40%, and even a 10% reduction. I mean, if I don't, it's not to say how well the business does in the winter or in the summer, but I guess the numbers that are coming in through the summer are excellent numbers, and they've been keeping great numbers. They're really honest about all of that, which is wonderful. And we saw how, if we would have known how successful the shoreboats could be, even kind of with this COVID thing, I don't believe the subsidy would have been that high. If we would have had somebody else giving good numbers prior, it might not have been a $239,000 subsidy. So,
we did cut it during the COVID time to 50% of their contract.
Okay, so we've already cut.
So we did cut during those, that last 2 weeks of March, and then April, May, and then in June we...
So I believe...
That was last fiscal year.
So it was in the last fiscal year, but during the peak shutdown, we did, we met with them and they agreed. We reduced the subsidy amount during the months of April and May by 50%. They still provided service, but at reduced hours. And then in June, I believe we reduced it by 25%.
So the hour, they made the hours commensurate instead of giving a little bit and saying, okay, we'll still keep the same service, but take a little cut. I'd like you to go back and try to talk up a little bit more to them. It's just that to see what we're having to do here and to see...
Mayor, I would personally like to be able to come back to the council for you to direct us exactly if you want us to reduce the amount of what service we're going to be providing to the harbor. I think that should be a discussion and an agreement between all the council, and then I know exactly what I'm working with when I speak with the contractor.
Okay,
do you understand what my ask is, Annie?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, because, I'm not sure. I mean, again, if it's... Okay, yes.
Because I would like to have a clear picture that if you say to me, I don't want to, let's not provide service out in the harbor for these 3 months, January, February.
Right. Or split days. I know there's a discussion that you're saying the mornings and the evenings. Well, if the boat is still in the water, can you split the day? If that's in fact, and I'm assuming that the shoreboat operators know when those hours are, when the peak is, right? I think you had said they have that.
I'm guessing they have that. I have monthly ridership numbers. I don't necessarily have to the hour, but...
But I was wondering if they might have that to kind of help with that discussion a little bit.
I mean, I think that's definitely something to look into. The proposal that they presented for the reduced hours was 9 to 5 during and I apologize if I don't have the date specifically right, but it was generally November to March, kind of the peak winter period.
Right.
It was a reduction in hours and then an increase in the user cost, $2 in the winter and $1 per passenger during the summer months. And so, given the reduced level of service as far as hours and the increased cost to the users, I really didn't find it to be equivalent to the 40,000 in savings the city would see, but
Yeah.
it still would be 40,000 in savings. That was one of the options they had. I just didn't feel that it was in the public's best interest to go that route.
Or you charge that additional amount in the wintertime, and you don't affect the summer rate.
I mean, the challenge is the ridership numbers in the winter months are significantly fewer than in the summer. And so if you were to just try to do the rate increase during the winter months, the amount of additional revenue brought in by that increased rate would be nominal, say in the thousands, not tens of thousands, but thousands of
okay.
dollars.
Okay.
So there's like every business here, there's a definite peak and valley, and in the summer months, you might see 10,000 riders a month, but in the winter months, you might see 1,000, so there's...
Right, okay. Not knowing what those numbers are, okay. But I would like us to have that conversation. We're not adopting the budget tonight anyway, so, perfect, okay.
Lisa, did you have something?
So I was going to ask about the shorebirds as well. Matt, I think your explanation made sense to me. And the only hesitation I have in cutting back that level of service is knowing that previously, I'm not sure if it was during a meeting or off, when I was just speaking to some of the harbor department team, the liability of people needing to get a ride when the shoreboat isn't operating and they don't have the means to get to and from, had, I think, previously fallen to harbor department staff, and that had been decided, of course, that should not be the case anymore. So knowing that and leaving people kind of in the lurch, I don't know that reduction in cost is going to balance out the loss of that service, even if it's during just certain hours of the day. I understand where we're at, but I would expect that if we were going to cut services that significantly, that the amount of money that it would return would also be therefore significant. And while this is a large amount of money, it doesn't feel significant in the massive whole that we're looking at otherwise. It feels like it's much smaller, and even half of that reduction would only be $10,000 or $20,000 as opposed to,
Oh, sure.
you know, I mean, every little bit helps, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to adjust that. My other question had been on the ridership, and I know Denise had said they were going to bring it back for the next meeting. I had asked about that prior to the meeting today. I know, we've mentioned this a few times now, talking about figuring out how to deal with the unfunded liability that comes from the retirement side of things, and what we can do to shift what we're doing there, change what we're doing there, be able to figure out a way to keep costs flat as opposed to increasing every year without knowing what that increase will look like. I'd like to make that a priority for us to try to figure out what we can do to change that.
One thing that might be worth investigating, and it doesn't change the liability amount per se, but we essentially are paying 7% interest to CalPERS on that unfunded pension amount. So when they come up with the amount that we owe, there's an assumption when we contribute to the pension plan that the pension grows by 7% a year. And so that amount that we owe is factored with essentially where we're paying a 7% interest. One thing that's fairly common that a lot of cities pursue, something called a pension obligation bond. So essentially, you're borrowing the money from an outside party, but at a lesser interest rate. And so instead of paying CalPERS on our unfunded pension liability at 7%, you might be paying a bondholder at, say, 3% or 3.5%. And so then the savings on interest in some cases can be considerable.
Yeah.
So that might be something worth looking into. I'd say the one thing just to keep in mind if we did go down that route, and kind of the one downside is, if the market, say, were to crash in 2021, even if we had a pension obligation bond to pay off our current unfunded liability, we could wake up the next year with a new unfunded pension liability with CalPERS if the market underperforms. So it's not a one-time payoff depending on what the market does, but given that we are paying 7% to CalPERS essentially, and given that interest rates generally are less than that, it may be worth pursuing, at least looking into a pension obligation bond.
I'd like to get 7%. Okay.
Annie, I was under the impression that we were going to adopt the budget tonight.
So was I.
If the only item up for potential discussion is the shore boat, then
Oh, I see.
I would make a motion to adopt the budget as is with the request that city staff have that conversation at
Okay.
your request. And we still move forward with a positive adoption of the budget.
Okay. I'm still concerned, though, with the harbor department. Big time.
I think
And-
that, yeah.
And how, okay, so our big,
I think the harbor rates have to come back. I hate that we've brought them back now several times, but we keep kind of, tiptoeing towards where we should be, and it's tough because I know that the costs are increasing, and the people I know have their pluses and minuses about benefits and what is and isn't included as part of the stay in the harbor, but I think that there's a gap, and we can't afford to keep having a gap.
it's a huge gap.
It is, but, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but, having very painfully
Yeah.
gone through this process, we made that decision to reduce
Right.
the buy two, get five, and it really went against our best interest. What happened was we lost the transient boater up the coast to anchorages and to other harbors. And what we did is we penalized all of our local boaters and our local businesses. And I guess before I personally would make a vote to increase those rates, I would like to see us do a little bit better in the marketing campaign to encourage the boaters, the transient boaters, if you will, to stay in Avalon Harbor through the winter, at least through the times that we have, better weather and whatnot. I mean, we know that the boating industry is going like gangbusters. I believe that we can do a lot better, and that increase in revenue will come from bringing more boaters to the harbor during the winter months. But I'm personally not in favor of a discussion of raising those rates right after we just last year went through that process, because we only penalized our locals and our local businesses.
And I would question how much money that actually was generating, and maybe that's a good question. Okay, I'm going to throw this one out, and this is going to be really off the wall. So Orrin, don't take offense, okay? But what if we privatized harbor operations? If we know in 2 or 3 years we're going to be out of this, and we're going to have to keep borrowing, that's fine if we know we're going to be out of this. But if our costs continue to go up, I don't know. And again, I could say that about every department for that matter. I mean, so I'm not picking on it, but this is a big money. And I guess, are we thinking within 2 or 3 years, the harbor should be back up to normal, so we bite the bullet for a couple of years and we should be fine?
And again, I don't, there's a lot of variables at play, but I do think even in the, catching me in an optimistic moment, I'll say it's going to be 3 to 5 years before we're, getting at least where we have our reserves to pre-COVID levels, and that's me being really optimistic. So this isn't a one-year tough budget, and that's why even the budget as presented, drawing on the reserves like we are, I am still hopeful that our revenues can beat some of the projections I put in there, so we're not spending all our reserves this year. Historically, we've had cruise ship revenues come in at $700,000-800,000 a year. While I, hope the cruise ship industry bounces back quickly, if that isn't the case, that is a $700,000-800,000 gap we're going to have to plug every year until cruise ships are back to that level. And so, I do think that this isn't, one, I would say, even if we adopt this budget tonight, we still should be looking for opportunities to make further reductions where possible impacting public safety. But this isn't a one-year budget in the sense that I think we should be looking at how we operate for the next 3, 5, 10 years. So again, I'm not advocating one way or the other on that topic, but I'm just saying that it's not going to be a 1 year to where we're back to pre-COVID norm.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm advocating, but I mean, talk about thinking out of the box, that's something. And anyway, so that probably went over like a lead balloon.
I think maybe even more than addressing the fees is looking, and I think Cindy, you're speaking in the the general area, looking at marketing the harbor, looking at, are there areas where we can actually add additional services without a significant increase in cost that would then allow us to provide more revenue to come into the harbor. I think there's probably a lot of different things we could do with that, and I would be interested to have a discussion about that, whether it's a study session or looking at a harbor study that looks at other similar places that have services and/or have those types of offerings for their boaters, and what that looks like for each of those places in terms of costs, making sure that we're, I know, fairly in line with what people are doing and how things are done, but also looking at, can we get, I mean, it's the time to get creative on everything, I think.
Well,
so.
and both of you are right on that count, and I know Oren, now that he'll be taking the lead, I'm sure he'll be talking to Denise about any ideas that he has, and, you know, taking to heart some of the comments that are made here about what we can do, so that's great, Oren, thank you. Okay.
Question?
Please.
Do we have questions?
Oh.
I have no questions.
Okay.
I would second then Cindy's motion.
You made motion? Okay. Moving to second. Comments? Okay. None. Call for the vote.
Councilmember De La Rosa, are you going to be on my little push button over there?
Yes.
And don't forget to vote yourself. So that was a motion by Cindy Cassidy, and who was my second?
Lisa.
And that's to adopt the budget as presented, and then we will come back and just update you about those two contracts.
Yeah.
And that was all ayes, Scott, so you would know.
And I just wanted to say, Lisa, I'm sorry, I was not suggesting that we shouldn't talk about the harbor rates. I was just bringing up the comment about what we just went through.
Yeah.
Sure, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And so your motion, Ms. McGugan Cassidy, was to adopt the resolution establishing the city budget for fiscal year 1920. Right?
So moved.
Hey,
Yeah.
a lot of years in there.
Okay. 2021.
2021.
Yes. Okay. We're moving right along. Oral communications. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. You will be limited to 2 minutes, and no action will be taken. Do we have any oral communication? No? Okay, thank you, John.
People that want to speak on items, but not right now.
That one, okay.
Michael, do you have anybody?
I have no comments.
Okay, consent calendar.
This evening on consent calendar, we have 6 items. We have minutes from the September 15, 2020 regular city council meeting. We have warrants to approve the disbursement of $1,433,518.98 between the period of September 5th and September 25th of 2020. The next one is to adopt a resolution approving the annual application for TDA funds for fiscal year 2021. 4 is to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager or designee to enter into a funding agreement with the State Resources Control Board and authorize a designated representative for the City of Avalon fuel tank replacement project. 5, this is the second reading of this ordinance, and that's to adopt an ordinance of the City of Avalon amending Chapter 12 of Title 6 of the City of Avalon Municipal Code to comply with the Department of Water Resources Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. 6 is to approve a resolution of conceptual support for the development of the new hospital campus.
Does anybody want anyone pulled? Any of these pulled? I have a question on number 4. So the state, they're going to pay for those tanks to be removed and everything, right? The State of California Water Resource Control Board?
This is the one that we had earmarked for $500,000.
Go ahead.
Yes, that was that line item that we've got. So it was $500,000.
But why does it say that, oh, but they will pay us?
They will contribute $500,000. The project has an estimate of $750,000.
Okay, forgot.
In total cost.
Okay.
And that's not all in 1 year, so we're getting started with the $500,000.
Right.
The underground tanks need to be put out of service by 2025.
Right.
So we think we'll be done with the project if we have sufficient funds by 2022.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, is there any comments on any of the consent items?
I have no comments.
Okay. And I'm assuming that Captain Hawking, that the people that want to comment, they're not commenting on the consent items? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, is there a motion? I make a motion to approve consent items number 1 through 6.
I'll second.
May move to second it? No further comment, call for the vote.
All ayes?
Great. Okay. And we now have a public hearing.
So the first item on the public hearing is on the miscellaneous fee schedule, and that is just to add an additional item, and that is our credit card processing fee, and the proposed fee is a 3.99% on all transactions. If you have any questions, Matt Baker did research this, and
So in the budget, we have $30,000 budgeted towards credit card fees in the harbor. What this essentially would do is if somebody wanted to pay with a credit card for any harbor service charge, nightly mooring, there would be a 3.99% added charge for the use of the credit card. If someone didn't want to have to pay that additional charge, they could use cash or check, so there wouldn't be an increase to the nightly mooring rate should they choose to pay with cash or check. It only applied to credit cards. We have $30,000 in the budget. I have budgeted the full amount in the budget, but this would save probably about $20,000 in the current year, and then $30,000 a year going forward if the usage rates between credit cards and cash stayed the same.
But in the resolution, you're not limiting it to harbor, so when the other one, so we get on board with everything else, we can do it with everything.
Right.
Right, okay. Okay, so let's, do you want comment from council first?
I have no comment.
Okay, let's open the public hearing. Is there anybody speaking on that?
I have no comments.
Okay.
Mayor, I just want to clarify, did you just say this processing fee would apply to everything in the city? It's just, this is strictly for the harbor-related fees?
Why is it just for the harbor? Because if all of a sudden we get a credit card to pay for other things, why wouldn't we?
If it is my goal to eventually be able to accept credit card for other transactions at City Hall, how this payment system works is through the net mooring system with another provider. So likely if we were to do something with at City Hall, it may be a different system. So we may have to come back if there is a different process. So right now we're really, I guess I should have said, we're really only talking specifically to harbor credit card service charges. But in the future, if we were able to accept credit cards at City Hall, we did accept PayPal during kind of the COVID period, but that has since ended, so we're back to just cash and check for City Hall payments. But it is ultimately one of my goals to be able to accept credit cards at City Hall. So we may have to come forward, but likely that wouldn't be until the next fee schedule, normal time.
And we couldn't change it at this point, Mayor, because it's been advertised pursuant to Brown Act bids.
Okay. And what is Recreation doing? Aren't they?
So RecPro does accept credit card fees, and the city does pay or absorbs the cost for accepting the credit card fees. Relative to the amount we collect in credit card fees in the harbor, the amount we collect in rec fees is nominal, and because it's a different payment provider, we'd have to change the way we collect with RecPro. So right now, just given that credit card fees in the harbor are $30,000 a year, and credit card fees from RecPro are only a couple thousand a year, we aren't looking to completely change the integration in RecPro, because the cost to change that service wouldn't be offset necessarily by what savings we would get. So it's really just a volume difference. We do collect credit cards for RecPro, but the amount we pay in fees is nominal compared to what we pay in the harbor. And the reason why the 3.99% is that's the cost the city pays. So it's not like the city is making money when someone uses a credit card fees. We're just passing the total cost of processing the credit card fee to the credit card user.
That seems to be the trend you're seeing.
There's a court case ruling that kind of changed the way, and I'm not a legal expert by any means, but I think that's why you're seeing this more and more often.
Okay. All right, council. So I'll close the public hearing. Okay.
I will make a motion to approve credit card processing fee increase of 3.99% on harbor transactions.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, if there's any comments there, Michael?
I have no comments.
Okay, call for the vote.
All ayes. The next one on our public hearing is extending the cross-channel wharfage. We brought this to council originally December 4th of 2018, where we added 50 cents to each way. It did have a sunset clause. We extended it, and we had a sunset clause of February 2021. And when we brought this to the council, was it last month? I think so, just to see if you're interested in bringing this forward, because we do have to change the municipal code, so this would be a first reading of it, and there would be no sunset date. It would be a determination by the city council.
Right. Okay.
And that money goes into the harbor fund.
Okay. Does council want to speak to that, even though I think unanimously we decided to bring this forward? We did. Okay, so then I'll open the public hearing. Are there any comments?
I have no comments.
Okay. Here comes one. We're talking about the wharfage?
Yep.
Okay.
The only comment I wanted to make about this is, it says that the ordinance to sunset when deemed appropriate by city council. I think that a discussion needs to be had and an actual date needs to be set. Don't just set this for some time in the future to come back. There was a set date for February 28th, 2021. I think there should be a new set date if you are to extend this.
Okay, I appreciate your comment. Okay. Hearing that, is there any discussion? I mean, I think his point is kind of valid. I know that's what kind of hurt the hospital without creating a sunset or whatever, what was kind of an issue. I know that if we're talking 3 or 4 years down the line before we're back up to snuff, or we just put it on our burner and remember in 4 or 5 years when we're really flush that, hey, we might be able to get rid of this now. But some of us
It's a
probably won't be
valuable
here.
50 cents each way. As it's noted in your staff report, that through the first year, the increase from March 1st of 2019 to February 29th of 2020, there was an additional $646,814 in wharfage that went into the harbor fund.
Well, that's pretty incredible, huh?
I think I'd be in favor of a 4-year sunset, if you guys are okay with adding that. That would allow 2 councils from now, the next set of council members, to be able to either continue it or choose to cut it off if they need to.
Yeah.
Be up for discussion at that point if they find that it's valuable and required for projects, it makes sense to continue it.
Right.
I think that's more than fair.
4 years?
That's a good suggestion.
Scott, can we, I don't know if you could hear Councilmember Lavelle, she's proposing to have a 4-year sunset on it. I have 2 questions
Yes,
for you.
we can do that by changing the language in the ordinance.
And so this could
Pulling
still
up right now.
constitute the first reading?
Yes, as long as, I'm scrolling to the actual ordinance now, and then what we can do is we can change the language in the ordinance. I'll read what that language would be. So the ordinance as amended would be, right now it says, "an ending when deemed appropriate and necessary by the council." It would say, "an ending on," and then we can plug a date, March 1st. Well, and if you want to do it just 4 years from that February date, we could put that date in.
Yeah,
or
that makes sense.
just give a date, but all you need to do is change the language tonight to say a specific date that will replace when deemed appropriate and necessary by the city council.
And March is March a good time or December a good time based on budget preparations for the following fiscal year?
What would be best for finance?
Yeah,
Any date would work, but tying it to a fiscal year in some ways would be easier, but we could, any date would work, but in some ways it'd be cleaner at June 30th, but we can make estimates work.
Oh, June 30th of 2025.
June 30, 2025?
Yeah.
Going once? Going twice?
Okay.
Okay.
So then it would then read, Section 1A, moving down would be discharged, loaded, and embarked commencing on March 1st, 2019, and ending on June 30th, 2025, striking out when deemed appropriate and necessary by the city council, the fee shall be increased as follows.
Yeah, good, perfect.
No, almost. It would be commencing on March 1st, 2019, and ending on June 30th, 2025, comma, the fee shall be increased as follows.
Agreed.
Oh.
Sold.
Yeah. Okay.
So the original cross-channel wharfage was set for 2 years, so why are we now expanding it for another 4 years? It was set on March 1st, 2019, and supposed to expire at the end of February 2021. Why wouldn't we extend it just for another 1 or 2 years, the same amount of time or less, then now you're doubling it. You're doubling the amount of time.
Yeah.
This was put in place before COVID happened. It was for other purposes. Now the excuse is due to COVID. That's the reason we're doing this.
No.
Well, I just don't think it's...
No.
No, it's not because of COVID, it's because of our harbor fund, and as you just heard in our budget presentation, how the harbor fund is suffering, so this 50 cents each way will continually increase, hopefully, with ridership, and they will go into our budget.
So the original
Harbor fund budget
sunset of
only.
2 years is now going to be 6 years?
My thought, Carl, just so you know where I was coming from with that idea of 4 years, was looking at the budgeted items that we were presented with over the next 5 to 7 years. The majority of them would come to completion within that final year, and those are the ones that we're looking at that had partial matches from grants coming in that needed city matches to go with them, which this allows for some of that city match funding to happen. And so knowing that those projects that are coming up, the completion of the mole, the infrastructure that we were looking at with some of the harbor uses that are out there right now, those things, including some of the stuff that's listed on this first page here, was what I was thinking of. I know that it's longer, but it also has proven to already be funds that are necessary. And it would allow us then at that time to revisit and to allow for that next council, whoever that is, to be able to say either continue or to cut it.
So but it still doesn't make sense why we're doubling the time frame when it's supposed to be sunsetting after 2 years, and now it's going to be extended to a total of 6 years.
I don't have an issue shortening it if people are.
Like, why can't it be
comfortable with that.
reviewed every 2 years? If it's already gone 2 years, why can't we just extend it another 2 years, then revisit it in 2 years? If you got to extend it another 2 years, I just don't want to be kicking it down that far down the road when sunset clauses are put in place. I think the people are expecting that to go away.
Yeah.
And so if it stays around, I just want it to be readdressed.
But the problem, to me, the situation is we're behind the 8 ball because of COVID, there's a lot of money we didn't collect that we would have collected. So now we're trying to just kind of like making up for that money to get us.
And more than likely, in 2 years, COVID will be behind us, and we'll be able to readdress this, and in 2 years, you can decide if you want to extend it another 2 years. Why are we going to force ourselves to have this for another 4 years?
Well, if it doesn't hurt the planning on staff's,
it hurts the people are thinking this is sunsetting, and you guys are making decisions so the city can make more money, and I understand the reasoning behind it, but a tax on the people, they should have an option. And if in 2 years things are looking a lot better and we don't need it, why is it going to have to go a whole 4 years?
But then it doesn't have to go to 4 years.
What are you talking about?
If in 2 years we decide we don't need to continue it, we can actually stop it. This is, you've asked for the sunset, and which we're looking at, but that doesn't mean it has to go to the sunset. We can always bring it back and say we don't need this to continue.
Yeah, and what's the likelihood of something that before a sunset to be taken off before the sunset?
That's not likely.
And it probably isn't likely.
Right.
But we don't know. But we don't know where we're going to be in 2 years.
In a year and a half, if there's a couple new council members that are seated, it could come back at that point too. Either way, 4 or longer.
I would like to revisit it every year. If it's not necessary in a year, after 2 years, 3 years, if it's necessary 8 years from now, at least we've revisited it every year to determine that it's necessary. Instead of just kicking it down for 4 years and then ignoring it, like, oh, we're just gonna keep banking this for 4 more years. And we don't care what the people think.
We do care what people think. I resent that comment.
Okay, so we appreciate your comments, and then council. Right now, we're seeing 4, if somebody wants to put that up for the vote, that's fine, or if somebody wants to discuss it, and then we...
I was fine with Lisa's recommendation. I appreciated the fact that you said this council and what may happen in the next election, and then at any time it can come back. If in 2 years we're financially in a really great shape, I think that... hopefully Matt is with us and can say this is something we should take off the table.
Right. Okay. So
is it something that we can ask for a report in 2 years on, just to see where we're at, how it's doing?
Oh, we'll definitely have
It'll
that.
be part of the budget anyway, but,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And just, yeah.
So is there starting to be a consensus for 2023 then?
I was fine with the original.
Oh, okay. I thought you were changing. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just fine with Lisa's motion.
So on the table, Cindy's motion was to remove that clause and change it to it's ending on June 30th, 2025, and the fee shall be increased as followed, and then everything is the same in the ordinance.
Okay, so
that was
okay, because when you started talking about the 2 years, I was getting confused.
I'm perfectly fine with either. I think that honestly, though, the number of projects that span 5 years or more, if you can plan budget-wise to have that money every year, it makes it a lot easier to know where you're going.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, I was under the impression we were doing that because we weren't going to be normal for the next 5 to 7 years.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, as long as we can visit this within the next 2 years, I'm okay with that.
Well, yeah, we will be, every budget year you'll be checking it, so.
Okay.
Okay, so we appreciate your comments, Carl.
Definitely.
Okay, so.
Who's my second? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Was that actually my motion?
Yes.
Okay, moved and seconded. Further comments? Any comments on your machine there?
I have no comments.
Okay, let's call for the vote.
All ayes.
Oh, if we could have that, and the motion is to waive further readings of the ordinance.
Yes.
We don't have to bring it back. That's correct? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So seconded.
Okay. Item number 9 is an update on outdoor dining. And I just want to say Jim has done an excellent job in rallying the troops and getting feedback and how to make this work. I noticed in there also there's the discussion with the fire chief that was in here, which was very well thought out, and like from a safety standpoint, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. And Jack Tucci, sir.
So there's a revised application that would include
Right.
the parameters established by the fire chief and they would just have to certify compliance with it. And then any additional lighting that they want to place would have to be approved by the Public Works Department. I was asked a question today, so the lighting in Middle Beach is a lot easier. On South Beach, it's a little bit more of a challenge. The far end where endemic places, the lighting is a problem underneath the sand, or the conduits. So we don't have the resources for that, so that we do have an option that they could place a small generator for lighting there, or it was suggested also that if our closest place where there's a live outlet on South Beach at that end, that an extension cord could then be placed under the sand.
Okay.
To help endemic at that end.
Okay. And I believe, do we have, I think we probably have Jim Lujohan listening, because I think
He is, and if you have questions,
Great.
I provided him the number, and he's able to call in.
Great, appreciate that. Yeah, I think they've all come up with some great plans. I got a contact from one of our restaurateurs today asking about, yesterday or today, about a big tent, like under the big top tent. And I know that there has been a little bit of discussion with that, and Jim has experience with that. That's an expensive proposition. And finding a space large enough for that, with the trees and everything else we have going on that sand park, that might be kind of difficult, but I don't think it's ruled out yet. But I know there's a little bit of discussion that way, and if Jim wants to add to that. But I do see we have Jack Tucci in the audience, and I'm curious what he wants to talk about.
It's about that tent. One of those.
Thank you, Jack.
So, Jack Tucci, 340 Wrigley Terrace. Been concerned here. We've had a pretty good response from customers coming to us, the island here, to get away. And so the businesses that are putting food out on the beach, ourselves or Blue Water, that have patios already, it's been a pretty good situation. But what I'm concerned about is in 30 days, daylight saving times changes. Things get dark earlier, they get cooler, and if you look at your weather situations, each month now to December starts to ding down, getting colder. And so how do we survive here when the state and the counties have to live with other areas within their areas to try to we stand in phase 1 for the rest of the year, it looks like. So how are we going to operate and take care of customers that come? One of the things I concerned about is if we're out there serving and it starts to rain, are you willing to support that those existing customers on our outdoor areas can go into the restaurant, finish their meal, and anybody else would have to be sold food to go? Or would we support that as a backup in case it does rain while we're, a storm come over and everybody's sitting there, their food's coming, what do we do?
Wait, hold on, Jack. Jordan, what are you saying?
I'm saying that,
No, Jordan would say, talk into the mic better.
oh,
Thank
is that
you.
better?
Oh,
Okay.
wow, yeah.
Wow. Okay, what I was concerned about is we're all serving food out, side. Some of us day and night, and some just night. But what if we're seated people and it starts to rain, or a big northwesterly gust comes up, and these people are out there with their food there, and they haven't paid for their bill and whatnot? What do we do as operators? Do we let our restaurants here in town, let the people come back inside, be prepared, and let them finish their meal, pay, and then anybody else, we wouldn't be serving, it would just be to go only? Do we have something where you guys would support us with the health department, whoever? It's not something we're planning, but things happen.
It will happen.
So that was one of the things. You can have a storm here without rain, northeaster. And so that makes it difficult on areas where water bangs up against the wall or comes up on the beach very high and where people may be sitting. So that's another level of issue that might happen. And then what are we supposed to do at that point? These things come along. Sometimes you see them in the news, or the next morning that this is what the weather's going to be. Does that mean we all shut down and leave everybody here hanging, or cut visitors? Or do we just wait until it happens and then do what I was just saying, move everything inside for an hour or so, and then seat everybody apart, like we did in June, and social distancing, and then and phase it out and don't sell anymore until the weather gets better. That was another. The picture you see there is in these pages I have. I've been working with Tim Canby, a structural engineer.
Yeah.
Does a lot of work on this island. And Tim has devised a way to make a removable strussel, kind of cover that you can serve people underneath, either with a tarp or a net, so some sunlight comes in. And he's made it where it can go up there with 4 poles, and the system he's engineered is very, very good. In fact, I talked to John about it. He's already put up one of these things here in town, a small patio, but it has a structural, vertical, and horizontal strength that you basically put the post in the ground with what they call a helical anchor. It goes in the ground, and then it holds those things steady. And there's a pipe system, which you can kind of see in different drawings. There's a pipe and wood system, and then you lay your tarp or thing above it. You could also have a see-through tarp on the ocean side to cover the wind when it gets kind of nasty in the winter, if you want. Mostly, I'm liking the idea for my patio, outside my existing patio, because my umbrellas anchor inside the patio very strong, but outside, they're just in buckets, and if I get a gust of wind, that thing goes up in the air like Mary Poppins. And I would want to consider this to replace all those outline umbrellas. It's something that's 16 feet wide by 36 feet deep, from even with my patio in the front on the street side going to the ocean fence.
Right.
So I can get 2 rows of seats and things there, and which I can organize people sitting, and then I can also have heaters in between. Right. Because of that 16 feet, it's actually almost 18 feet with the overhang on one side, 20 feet with the overhangs. I can have a 6-foot separation in the middle and put 4 of those outdoor heaters in there just to keep the area warm for people, comfort, because at 5 o'clock it's going to be chilly. And how do we serve and take care of people who knows, till March, till next spring, I have no idea, you know? And I don't think anybody does, and whether we're gonna go in and come out, because we're stuck in this stupid county that we have no relationship to the rest of things going on in the mainland. And so, anyway, I brought this because this is something you might be able to use for the other restaurants. They could build these sections going down there. They end up, can hold quite a few people. And the tables and chairs, when you put them in there, foldable tables, instead of the 4 top like we have now, they're all over the place. You can have long tables and put 2s and 4s together and 6s, and you could do the whole beach that way. This thing can go up or down in 2 to 4 hours. So it's able to take it off, and that's what I want to do where I'm at, but I also thought it might be something you might want to look at instead of a tent, because the sides are open. You could close one side, and you could cover the ceiling with netting or a tarp.
Well, I appreciate the research you've done and the kind of conversations that you're having about what are we going to do in winter and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that is a Jim Lujohan kind of conversation with some of your other restaurateurs to kind of figure that out. But my question about this thing, Trestle, is that Island Company property or city property?
It's Island Company.
Okay, so in terms of that being approved on this property, the Island Company property, would that have to go before the city, before he could construct these things?
Yes, there would be a process. We just have to see if any of it's on the public right-of-way, and, but just to be clear, I appreciate Jack's thinking out of the box, his ideas, but on your item this evening, it isn't to approve his plan.
Oh, I know that.
So just make sure that...
Yeah.
And the other thing too, we just need to make sure it would comply with all of LA County public health requirements. They do have some very strict guidelines regarding canopies, and I believe that you need to have all 4 walls open, but we can go ahead and double check on that as well.
I think it's 3.
I thought it was 3 too.
3 out of 4.
But I mean, I wanted to bring it, first of all, thank you, but yes, this would be Island Company property, but if any of the other...
Yeah, what I was thinking is that a tent, I know isn't gonna work.
Right.
Because I was traveling, I went to different resort areas, and I saw all these street tents, and believe me, they're like $15,000, $20,000 for 3 months.
Yeah.
With somebody to bring them in, and they're not coming in the ocean either, so they're just on the streets of Lake Tahoe or something, and and so I just saying that this has a lot of sense, because it's just 4 big pieces of wood and then pipe and things, and the connector is what he's designed, engineered, so you have lateral and vertical strength, and it won't fall down.
Right.
And if you anchor it, it stays. You could anchor it in the sand and everything else, but would you be doing those for the other restaurants for the winter?
Yeah.
It's just something to think about, because it does create a canopy that gives you some warmth.
Right.
If you want, and for outdoor seating.
Yeah.
But what do you guys have as far as what we're going to do this fall?
That hasn't, the main discussions, and correct me if I'm wrong, Denise or Michael, the main discussions on how the restaurateurs want to proceed is being generated by them, just like the staff report said. So they're giving us their updates, and they're saying, kind of, is this good? Because we're revising the special use application to include the heaters and whatever else.
Lights.
So I guess if the restaurateurs get together and say, hey, what about this? It should generate from them, because they know better what their need is than I think we do sitting here. I mean, right, council? Okay, so talk with Jim Lujohan and some of those other restaurateurs and see what they're thinking. They may think great, or they may say no. I mean, so I think that's where it needs to start.
But I think what Jack's asking is about his specific idea, that you've got to take that directly to the city.
Yeah.
That isn't for us, just.
But it
just
has to
now?
be approved by the island company first, because it's their property.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Okay.
But I was just, when you mentioned, I heard a tent, I just said, gee, that ain't gonna work.
No, and that's what I...
And so then I just said, I got plans and stuff I've been working on.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share them with you guys.
No, appreciate
But the issue kind of really is, what do we do as a community here when it rains? Are you guys gonna support us letting people go back inside real quick?
I don't know that we can make that, I don't know that we can say that.
We have always adhered to LA County's guidelines,
Yeah.
but that is up to the council, but
The
my
question-
recommendation...
LA County's over there.
Yeah. So Jack, the question that I had asked at the last, there's weekly elected officials calls with LA County Department of Public Health, and both myself and a representative from the city of Beverly Hills, and I believe also a representative from the city of Manhattan Beach, had asked the question about that, because we have outdoor spaces that tend to be impacted by the weather that would not make a tent easy to be utilized and/or safe, potentially, as has been brought up already with wind gusts and everything else. And had brought up the idea, right now it is one wall. You can have a wall, not two, not three, not four.
Yeah.
My question to them had been, can you please review if people have something open to something like the ocean or to something like a very, high level of air movement access way, would it be possible to then increase the percentage of available diners as opposed to starting at 25%? So if you think of your restaurant and being potentially able to open up some of those doorways that provide fresh air flowing into the building.
Yeah.
Specifically thinking of places along Front Street that have the ability to have the kind of accordion doors opened all the way and/or windows dropped out to allow for full airflow. They actually seemed semi-amenable to it. They would not confirm that they would do that, but they said it was part of the discussion they would have. They didn't realize some restaurants were going to run into those issues and didn't have a parking lot.
It's still at 25% though.
Potentially more was what we had asked for.
Yeah.
So, because we had said it wouldn't work to accommodate all the people that are coming to visit at that capacity. It
Yeah.
would need to be more than that. So it's, I think, a discussion that's happening, but as Denise said, we defer to LA County because we are part of LA County. It's not just over there. People from LA County are coming here. People from Orange County are coming here. And as we've seen now in several cities and states, the moment that you put them all indoors, the numbers spike and we get shut back down again. And I don't want to see us shut back down again. That's the whole reason. It's not for being, I'm getting a little frustrated with people saying, you should just open it up. What are you doing? It's not for anything other than we're trying to keep people healthy and not have to shut down again. So I know
Recognize-
that's not an answer to your question, but that's.
Yeah,
what we got.
but we need to recognize that people are coming here.
I do.
And they're coming here, my sales for August were higher than July, it's usually the reverse, and this is higher than last year's September. And they're getting away, and you can see it, especially even the weekends right now. You can see it's just like summer, and it's pretty hard to deal with in some cases because we're not set up for just totally outdoor seating,
Right,
It's just-
yeah, we do.
You know that.
Okay.
Okay, anyway, I just thought something like this, if is another answer to put shelter on the beach for the other restaurants.
Right.
Tim is available if you'd like, and
Great.
and if that's a way to kind of get cover, then
Yeah.
let's talk to him.
Well, thank you.
You
And
bet.
thank you for always thinking of something. You're always investigating. Okay, and Chief Craig, did you want to comment? You were standing there a minute ago, like you want to say something.
Yeah, there's just a call
I
right now.
had provided him a copy of what Mr. Tucci gave to you, just so he could
Oh, okay.
opinion in about the structure, and I'm assuming heaters would be in there, and safety.
Right. Yes, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. I just wanted to quickly make 2 points. I think you've already touched on the packet that Mr. Tucci presented. It shows what I would call a carport on a single-family residence. I don't know if that's a fair comparison to maybe what he's looking for. And regardless, any structure, whether temporary or permanent, needs to go through the planning department and a planning process and be engineered for wind, fire, all the things that would make it a safe structure in any environment.
Right.
High wind, winter, what have you.
Okay.
The second thing I just quickly wanted to touch on with all of the safety concerns with the outdoor heaters, I just wanted to make it clear, kind of make a point about propane. The thing that makes liquid propane gas such an efficient fuel is that it has a high expansion rate. So what makes it makes it a good fuel source for storage and small quantities also makes it very hazardous inside of a building. That's why under no circumstances, in any conditions, can it be stored inside of a structure. And that's my concern with having a lot of outdoor heaters and extra bottles floating around out there, especially with restaurants that typically don't have outdoor dining and don't have heaters, and it would be some new product that they would purchase and then bring those new tanks and appliances in. Propane, it expands from 1 liquid gallon to 270 vapor gallons. So a full tank of 5 gallons of LPG expands to over 1,300 vapor gallons. So you can imagine, you could easily fill a room like this with liquid propane vapors in a short order with 1 tank. So
Wow.
I just wanted to make that point. Do you have any questions for me?
No, so that's why and that's, I guess the one thing was, and you'll be paying attention to is where they're going to store these things in the evening when they bring them in, huh?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Because they can't go inside, they
Yeah.
have to be stored outside.
Yeah. Huh, that might be a challenge in and of itself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any comments from,
I have no comments.
okay, council, do you have comments, or do we just want to move ahead and approve the revised special use application?
Question, so the businesses are gonna provide this on their own, and then the chief is gonna look over them? Or are we providing anything?
On Chief's end, he just gave us the parameters, those 7 conditions that they would have to meet, which is we revised on the application. It's not for the chief to approve, other than these are parameters that he has established for their conditions in order to have the heaters. The only thing that the city would be approving would be the lighting.
Okay. Michael, you want to make a motion to approve it?
I guess this would be a good spot just to say that, asking your permission, I've authored a letter to Assemblymember O'Donnell and State Senator Van Allen, who are friends of Avalon, and they are very familiar with our circumstances here as far as like the outdoor dining instance, and to sending them a letter asking them for help to get through the blueprint faster. And I know that it did nothing for us before, but it doesn't help to go through every door and see if anything helps.
And I guess Jim said he was going to be meeting with Patrick O'Donnell on Thursday and talking the whole thing about how we could maybe advance the dining in Avalon since our numbers are so good and that kind of thing. Okay, great. So,
Then I will make the motion to approve the new
bless you.
outdoor permit.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there further comment? Call for the vote.
Michael?
Oh.
Is there anything?
I have no comments.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Okay. So now we'll get down.
Oops, sorry.
All eyes. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I was writing, not looking up.
Let's just be sorry.
Okay, now we will go to department head reports. Who would like to step up to the base first? I think Matt's pretty well covered, right?
Bob's taking a breather this meeting. Good evening, members of the council. Thank you for hearing me. 5 just quick updates. 1, update on the blood drive. The goal was 150 pints of blood. We had 115, so fell a little short. 58 on Thursday, 57 on Friday. Special thanks to Lisa Love and her crew. Great crew, throughout the 2-day event. I think maybe a lesson learned is we probably, if there's an opportunity to go later in the evening, they would cut it short at 3:30, people getting off work, made it a little difficult for people to get out. So we hope to have them back, and I think that's something we could look at.
But that was way up from last year was 63, wasn't it?
93.
93. Oh, so it's...
Yeah, one day, but it was a one-day event, longer into the evening. They got on a 7:30 boat, and pushed it a little bit later. Fuse, just special thanks, the Red Cross crew won. Mary Boyd was instrumental in getting hotel rooms and a lot of the logistics. Grant Anthor as well. All our hotel sponsors, we had, I think there was a total of 17 that came over, and all of them stayed at a hotel. So thank you all those. Lions Club, Rotary Club, and the Knights of Columbus for donating for express tickets and those types of things to get over. Our supervised school program is going well. We're at Singing Waters. We're just at close to capacity at the 16 children at that site with 2 staff. We have had parents reach out for older kids, 5th through 8th grade, and took an opportunity to look at Overlook Hall. They are going to accommodate 6 to 8 kids starting on Monday for a program there. So I want to thank the Island Foundation, the staffing there, the Rifkins for opening that venue up for the program. Senior fitness, we're planning to start some of our programs back to some degree. We got funding from the Yacht Club for this particular one. Senior fitness in the park with Carla Lupa, the outdoors across the street at Kids Park. Social distance, it'll be Mondays and Wednesdays from 9:30 to 10:15. Participants will need to wear a mask, bring out your mat, it'll be on the grass, but just a nice outdoor area for that, starting Mondays and Wednesdays. Our Halloween activities.
Is there a fee for that?
For residents, there's no charge. Again, the Yacht Club is paying for the staffing for that, and it's a $5 fee for non-residents.
Okay, thank you.
Halloween activities, I was hoping by this meeting to have a flyer and everything set. We're still working on one component of it we haven't nailed down, but regardless, I'm going to have something out by the end of this week. We are going to do a golf cart parade through town. Mid-parade route, we'll have mayor, and if we can get another council member or so to hand out little bags of candy. We're going to encourage, no throwing out candy on the flyer. There'll be no trick-or-treating. A lot of the things that LA County is asking us to do. But we thought we could take an opportunity at the lineup to do a costume contest. They can stay in their cars, kind of show off their costumes. We will even include golf cart decorating if the whole family's in theme, and the golf cart's Flintstones, and it's a Flintstone mobile, and they're all in costume, and the cart's decorated. That would be a category as well. And at the end of the parade route, we will hand out awards, judge them at the beginning, meet them at the end, and then send them on their way without them having to get out of their cart at all. We're also going to include a pumpkin carving contest. We'll have details on the flyer as well. You can drop off your pumpkins at Wrigley Stage, and we'll display them there. We'll judge them, pick up your pumpkin at the end of the golf cart parade, and we'll have awards for that. And then I think we'll bring back the Vaughn's paper bag decorating contest and kind of include that as part of the activities. If we nail down this last part of it, we'll include that in the flyer. If not, we'll do that another time. And the last one I have is our community cleanup day. We've got a community cleanup day scheduled for Saturday, November 14th at 9 o'clock. Encouraging families to come out, and we'll give them routes. We'll social distance the group, send them out with masks and gloves, and see what we can do to clean up the community. I think I may have mentioned, but Mr. Tony will be out. His parents have agreed to have him come out, and it'd be nice to get him back on the island. He hasn't been here since he left in March, and so I think they're looking forward to that.
That's great.
So that's it, unless you've got questions.
Sorry, can I just clarify on Halloween? So, can you just clarify LA County's rules on trick-or-treating? I know the city won't be doing a specific trick-or-treating, but after the parade and all that, if our...
My understanding is there's no trick-or-treating at all. It's totally discouraged. I don't know if that's the latest I've heard. I don't know if Michael would have anything.
I thought they had, I know they issued a couple guidance. I did not have a chance to review those. They had made an initial statement, and then they had clarified some of that based on some pushback, so I can't tell you exactly what those were. What we can do is follow up, pull those guidelines, make sure that they're consistent with the proposed, and then send it out in a memo to council.
But the city's not really, I mean, it's not really the city's doing or not doing. I mean, if residents decide they're gonna go, they're gonna go, right? It's not, I mean, as long as we as a city aren't out there saying, you know, do something against the regulations, but we're, I mean, is there?
Yeah, I think what we can do is we can pull up the guidelines and we can get it out, make announcements in regards to what it is, whether it is or not. Certainly, we're not going to be involved in it. And then certainly report back also out at the next council meeting.
Right, but if they so choose, it's just a.
We wouldn't be promoting it at all in the sense that we will make sure that people know what the guidelines are from LA County.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, it's a sort of at your own risk sort of thing, is what it would be. I mean, it would be no different than we're still on a stay-at-home order and people are traveling. If people choose to do it, they're gonna do it.
Yeah, I mean, last I saw it was discouraged. I will certainly look into it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yes. What if I don't have a golf cart and I am a family of 4? May I walk in the parade?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah, it'll be golf carts only.
Only, okay. And how about opening our public parks? What's been decided about opening?
I was waiting for Denise to get back. I had some, conversation a little bit with staff today. So under the direction, parks can be opened back up. It's up to cities to be able to do that. As I read through this, there's some language in there saying, there's parks are specifically, supposed to support residents in the community up to a half mile away. And I don't know that all of our parks do that. We get a lot of, traffic off of the boats for Canobie Park and City and Kids Park, City Park, excuse me. I think what my recommendation is that we possibly open Kids Park and see how that goes, because it doesn't get a lot of the, the visitor traffic on it. But it needs to have that discussion with the city manager.
Okay, great, yeah.
Yeah.
I know Jordan Monroe's kids can't wait to get back on the swings, right? And a lot of other children, I'm sure, so, okay, thank you.
And I just, I know this is going to be an unpopular comment, but on 2 separate occasions, I've had a conversation over the last 2 weeks with 2 people. The parks have been closed by LA County, and one complaint came in about we've now deemed that our beaches are considered sand parks.
Yes.
And so, we've had our beaches open all summer, and now that we are now calling them sand parks, but yet parks in LA County have been closed. So that was one. The second one was, a family of 3, 4, 5 kids can't go and be at a park by themselves as a family, even if they choose to clean up, but yet the skate park's open and the pickleball court's open. And so I'm mentioning that because it sort of seems like some things are okay, but some things aren't. And I want us to just look at how that is visually to our community, that we say one thing, this is okay, but that's not. And that's partially why I was making such a strong statement about Halloween, because it's these young kids in our community have, in my opinion, paid the dearest price through all of these restrictions through COVID. And now that we've got people in their homes doing schooling, we've got families home 24 hours a day with each other. There's very little ability to expel energy, and there's a lot of stress happening in the homes. And so I want us to look at how do we do more, especially for this younger youth in our community.
And just for clarification, my understanding was what was actually closed were more on the playgrounds. So parks with the playgrounds were closed, but parks with, there was just open space, that those have been allowed. People could go out there, they could walk around in the wide open spaces. They just, they couldn't go onto the playground equipment. And what LA County has now reversed or said is those can be open at the discretion of the local jurisdictions. So they're given the purview to open those playgrounds, not necessarily places where they've got open space.
Right. So Joe Machado Field could be open if we wanted to open a few hours a day or something?
Any of our parks now would qualify for that, regardless of whether they had playgrounds or not.
Okay, good.
I think the issue with that, with the playground specifically, was that the concern of not being able to keep families from interacting with each other on the play equipment, which if any of us, we've all seen on Kanabe especially, you get 4 families in there and there's no space between anybody.
Right.
And, even though it's been taped off, there have still been people that literally walk over the tape and go into the park anyway, and then there's dozens of people in there. There's no way to keep it clean in between and have someone staffed there to do that. Like, there's a lot of reasons why it makes sense, but I think it's great if we can get some of them back open, but the hard part is that challenge of knowing that someone playing pickleball or someone even skating may be a little bit older and easily understand you can't get close to this person, you can't be in proximity to them without a mask on, without, that type of thing, so.
You'd like to think that.
You would assume. Sometimes not so much, but yeah.
Mike was correct on the distinction with the playgrounds and the open play area. One of the things I'd like to add to your point, the conversation I had with the Rifkins was such that they'd like to see the city do some more things with the youth for just the same reasons you brought up. And they've asked us to put together a proposal. We're doing that now to run some activities maybe after school where they've been on their computers for 4 hours, 6 hours. Right. So we're looking at some programming up at Joe Machado Field that would start, here in the next few weeks. They would fund, staff to be up there just to get them to get the wiggles out and, run and play and jump and those types of things. So we're hoping to have something together here in the next little bit, get them to approve it, and then move forward with it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's all good news. Okay.
Hello, good evening.
Welcome.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Listen, I don't have a whole lot to report on, but I do have a few things I wanted to point out. We have been experiencing very strong numbers down in the harbor with regards to the visiting boaters. We're selling lots of nights. Many boaters are taking advantage of the good weather and the warm waters. Weekends have been unusually busy, consistently selling out one weekend after another. This has been a real silver lining, obviously, despite the economic bad news. The October 3rd lobster opener that we just had, that weekend also attracted many boaters who also took part in finding and catching the local lobster from around the island. All this activity has kept Harbor Patrol very busy. We've been signing moorings, sorting out mooring issues, minor boat accidents, wrap-ups, minor medical calls, and again, our goal is just that everybody enjoy themselves but come home safely. Some changes you're going to see around the harbor in October is going to be the removal of the end float on October 15th. That also includes the shoreboat float, which will also be disconnected from the pleasure pier. And then you're also going to notice the Avalon boat stand start to break down their moorings and their equipment as they anticipate the change in season. They usually have most of their moorings out by the end of the month, and according to J.J. Guyan, he expects to be closed by October 15th, or excuse me, October 25th.
Really?
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
That was good and very thorough.
All right,
Appreciate
thank you.
it. Yeah.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, City staff. Just very quickly, we still have warm weather, but we did see significant improvement in our fire weather, the high heat conditions, and also a favorable change in wind, so now so that we're not getting all that smoke from the mainland fires. That's my understanding. We had down the coast in the county area over the weekend, we did have a vessel fire and a dive fatality. And then lastly, I received a very generous donation of disposable gowns. They're like a plastic type apron, slip it on gown that's a terrific resource for first responders. However, I've got this generous resource is stacking up at the fire station. So I literally have thousands of these gowns. So if there's any organization or business that needs some, please have them contact me. I'd be happy to share some of this. Unless you have anything for me, that's all I have.
No, that's great.
All right, thank you very much.
Can we make some, if you've got that many thousands, can we make Halloween costumes out of a couple of them?
If there's some kids that would like to dress up as a first responder and would like a plastic gown, I would be happy to share that with them.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Council. The LA County Sheriff's Department has a case of gowns from the fire department. As does the rec department. I really don't have much tonight. The only thing I just wanted to let everybody know is our numbers are still high. We're still seeing a lot of visitors on the island. Our calls for service are up along with our arrests. Our most common arrests are drunk in public and drunk domestic violence incidents. That still is our number one arrest on the island. And that's all I have. This month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So if you take any time, you can do a little research online and you can see how to prevent domestic violence incidents from occurring. And my number one advice is, if you've been drinking and you're involved in an argument with your significant other, please leave that situation until things calm down and then come back later. Go to a friend's house, get a hotel, call the deputies before there's violence, and we will help you out. We will take you somewhere, we will get you out of that situation. And that's all I have.
Anything for Captain Huckett?
I'm just kind of wondering, I know that, well, I hear all the time, I'm Five Corners, so I hear drunk people constantly. But do we look into, where they're getting over intoxicated? Like, is it at a restaurant? Are they purchasing the alcohol themselves? Are they being overserved?
Yeah, it's, right now, the two main bars are closed, so it's not coming from the bars. The restaurants, they do come from the restaurants. There is a couple restaurants that are, I don't want to say over-serving, I don't like using those words. However, I do have ABC coming over to basically keep an eye on the restaurants to make sure, because the people are drinking so much at the restaurants where the person can't lift their head up off the table and they're asking if they want another drink. And that's where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're pouring more alcohol in the drink itself. It's like, once you realize, and I always joke about this, but it seems like one of your friends would say, hey, you know what, Mike? Yeah, you had enough. We're good right now. Let's relax for a little bit. Yeah. And they don't do that. They just keep serving, and the people keep drinking, and then the next thing we get a call and it's a domestic violence incident, and then we have no choice. So we have to go by the law. So ABC will be coming over. They already come a couple times a year anyway, and a lot of it's just education. They get new employees and they need to go through like one of the online ABC programs so they can learn, how to pour the proper amount, make sure they're in compliance with sanitation issues. And then now we have the COVID, so there's other issues that go along with it at the restaurants since the bars aren't open. So I hope that answered your question. I know it's kind of a long way around.
No,
but-
yes,
But
totally
the
get it.
bottom line, it's just common sense. If you're running a restaurant and you have somebody that is so intoxicated that you can tell they're having issues, please don't serve them anymore. And, you know, give them a cup of coffee and a sandwich or something.
And I understand Officer Okada has retired?
Yes, ma'am. She retired. She had basically 6 years on the department. She started when she was much older than deputies that have 30-plus years, and she did retire. She loved the island. She basically, her daughter grew up here, she worked here, she owned a couple businesses here, then she became a deputy sheriff, then she comes over and asked to work in Avalon as a deputy, and now her husband's been retired, and now she's retiring so she can spend time with him.
Well, wonderful. I think she did a very good job. And then she will be getting a replacement, or do we already have a replacement?
Yes, we will be getting a replacement. We don't have the replacement yet. There is a couple people that I'm looking at, but I just need to make sure they're a good fit for the island. We have some real good deputies right now that are a real good fit, and I want to make sure people that I select are basically friendly, helping the community, and community-oriented policing is what I really look at for people that I want to bring in.
And hopefully we can find somebody that has some longevity, more than 2 or 3 years. That would be wonderful for our community.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Bob Greenlaw, nothing to report?
Yeah, I guess, just like I reported out last time, our ability with the amount of reduction in staffing, you see that we were at 9.5 equivalent, full-time equivalent reduction, but, you know, with some of those being part-time positions, you're seeing that, you know, 11 or 12 people are now, have been reduced as a resource to Public Works and Operations and Maintenance. So the way we do business, the way that we look at our workflow and our priorities, you know, some of that's going to be changing. So just want to make the public aware of that as they're seeing some things that we have done previously in the past that we're changing our mode of operation. So, and then also report out that soon you'll see a big effort to work with the public on Mole Phase 2 and what that could be. So that should be soon, you know, by start of November. We expect to be out with the public on that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
And I had a couple of quick updates on the planning side. I just wanted to let everybody know that early in mid-September, we had a technical advisory committee meeting. This was the inaugural meeting. This group is getting together to work on the sea level rise and climate change adaptation plan in coordination with the city's consultant, Moffitt and Nichols. They are planning for a larger community engagement process that is going to look a little bit different than typical community engagement meetings would normally look at because we are still in the midst of COVID. So we are looking for a lot of different ways to gather community input. We'll be bouncing those ideas off of the technical advisory committee. They have another meeting, their second meeting coming up in a couple weeks, so they'll be discussing those. We've got a really nice website that'll capture a lot of input. We'll be trying to capture as much input in both English and Spanish, and we will be coming back here to provide council as well as Planning Commission regular updates on the progress of that. And this is being funded through both Caltrans as well as the California Coastal Commission. They each have small nuances that are part of that process. The second thing I wanted to talk about was just we have an upcoming Planning Commission meeting on the 21st. As we briefly mentioned earlier in the meeting, they are going to be considering a resolution amending the Avalon Municipal Code to go from a conditional use permit to a license process for transient occupancy or short-term rentals. So we've got that, and they will also be doing a training just prior to the kickoff of that meeting. So we'll be doing some regular ongoing trainings. That'll be the first one for the Planning Commission. And then last, I just wanted to give a quick update. As many people may or may not know, we were kind of hoping to see some significant progress on the Phase 4 negotiations. It's been kind of a wild week, and then unfortunately earlier this afternoon, President Trump announced on Twitter that he's rejected the current Democrats' stimulus offer and ordered his representatives to stop negotiating until after the election. So we're hoping that that does not change. This is going to have some significant and tangible and immediate impacts. Airlines have already said that they're going to be getting thousands of layoffs, blaming some of the expiring aid because they were hoping for, there's a lot of industries that this is going to affect. There's also a provision in there that Avalon could get up to $877,000. We are still working with Townsend Public Affairs, and they are in communication with everybody, their contacts in the White House, to see where that's going to end and if there is any other movement that can take a foot in light of these new directions. It's kind of a 180 that we were given. And then the last thing that I want to just talk about is Dr. Mark Galley gave his update every Tuesday. They assign new categories. Right now, we've got some great movement on a couple of our indicators. Unfortunately, we're still stuck in the purple. There are a few counties, they're mostly smaller rural communities up in the northern and central counties in California. They're making a little bit of progress. There's at least one that has now moved back from red to purple. That was Tehama County. So we're still in the purple, but we're hopeful that hopefully if we can continue to see small iterative changes on the other metric, that maybe we can move into the red category, which would open up some additional industries. So we'll continue to keep appraised of that, and we'll provide some periodic updates as needed.
Great, thank you. Okay, Council? Councilwoman LaVelle?
Census update, which is probably the most encouraging one we've ever gotten to give. We are at, as of Monday, Friday, 89% completion so far. 89% includes not only the stuff that is self-reported or done online, but also the enumerator-based counts. There were, at the time of the last meeting that we had, 433 open cases. Of those, 333 we believe are vacation rentals. And in addition to that last 100, we think a number of those are second homes. There was some amazing last-minute coordination between Cassandra Ponce, who's the head enumerator here on the island, Dan Hunke, Tricia from the Recreation Department, Scott Girlzinko, and the shore boats to get out and count those who had not yet been counted on their liveaboard boats, and then also to work with some of the members of the community that are currently homeless to make sure they were counted as well. So that increased the count by another, I believe, 17 people total. Then the census also had mobile questionnaire assistance team come over last week, and they did half of their day in front of Vaughn's and half of their day in front of Leo's, and they got an additional 18 people. Currently, as of right now where it stands with everything, the census still is technically open until the end of this month, until the 31st. There had been talk of the department head in charge of that cutting it at yesterday as the final date, and currently the judge is upholding the fact that it's through the 31st. We'll see if that changes or not. There was a comment made that people thought they had to be able to vote to be able to be counted in the census. You do not need to be able to vote to be counted in the census. You can be counted. If you haven't done your census yet, please go to my2020census.gov and you will be able to fill out the census there. It is safe, it is secure. You can do that without having fear of anyone getting your information in any other department. It is just for the Census Bureau only. It helps with regards to funding for the city, it helps with regards to representation in Congress, and it helps fund schools and other projects throughout our community and other local communities as well. The team that's been working on this has been amazing. Scarlett and Thelma from the census, they just officially wrapped up their time because of the changing world of the census, so I want to say thank you to them. Jim from the chamber, the team from planning, Amanda and Rocio, Dan and Tricia from recreation, Teresa McDowell from Two Harbors, Alejandra Barriga Ireis has been amazingly helpful, Bryce from Leo's, Cassandra, as I mentioned, from the team, and all of her enumerators that are coming back, and they've also got other team members coming out to double check and triple check to make sure everyone's getting counted. I feel like we're very close to a full count, which is amazing, but I know there are some people who haven't been counted yet, so please make sure that you're being counted. Fill it out. It literally takes a few minutes, and you will be able to help the community with that. Still attending the elected officials' calls for COVID and just getting those updates and trying to really push for some leniency where we can, where it's still safe to help us reopen some industries. Other than that, I think that's what I've got. Oh, it has been working with the other industries and hearing and talking with everyone, as kind of everyone said, it has been a better September than last year. September, so far, from what I've seen, has actually been busier than August was. And October is shaping up to be the same way. The weekends are already crazy. I know Judy had put out a reminder, but if you are needing to travel on the boat at all over the next 6 weeks, especially around the weekends, please make sure you make your plans in advance. They won't add more boat times unless you have booked it out, and they won't do that unless you call and ask them to. So if you need to travel, please plan ahead.
Right, exactly.
Did you want to do city manager and city attorney?
Did I forget them? I sure did.
I wouldn't let you forget me.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
I'll do it after you guys.
Okay, thank you though, Michael.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I have a question. How long can a vehicle stay on the street if it's broken down?
Has it been abandoned, Michael? Are you talking about?
No, I'm saying where somebody has a vehicle that they put a little note on it, broken.
Yeah.
How long can that vehicle sit with that little note broken without getting cited?
Well, if they put it there after the 72 hours, code, if they know whose vehicle it is, usually contacts the person and says, can you give proof that you've either ordered a part, you have an appointment with Yamaha or with Buffalo Motors, and then if you give me offline, Michael, exactly which one.
My example being is that there was a golf cart parked on Clarissa Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, with a note broken, and miraculously on Sunday it moved. It was gone. It sat there all weekend.
On the wrong side of the street?
On the wrong side of the street, and it was not pushed over to the other side.
We try to give people the benefit of the doubt, Michael.
And I understand that, but it really made it hard all weekend for traffic to come through.
Okay.
But I was just wondering what the time frame is when somebody writes the note broken on their golf cart. It's just one of those little things.
Technically, it should be cited right away, and as I said, we try to give benefit of the doubt and to have some kind of leniency, and if people take advantage, like maybe that's what happened there, it's...
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I'm not sure if we've all registered for the league conference, which starts tomorrow, but I will be attending when I can, the League of California Cities annual conference tomorrow for the next 3 days. So it's going to be interesting because it's going to be virtual. And then on Thursday evening, please join me at a town hall in regards to saving our hospital. You can go to cimc.org to get more information, but I will be on the town hall this Thursday.
Thursday at 5 o'clock?
At 5 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Along with Dr. Warren.
Yeah, good.
So,
okay.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Councilmember Yesenia?
Yes,
Well, I wanted to say thank you to everyone that Lisa mentioned for the census, because that was amazing. When I got her voicemail that said 89, I freaked out. So that was great, and thank you, Dan, for everything you guys did. I know that Captain had mentioned there's been a lot of domestic violence calls. I just want to remind maybe businesses and the public that if the Catalina Island Women's Forum does have information on who they should call. I know I've been talking to Tessa Hernandez, and she just made the really cool business cards with all that information if they need it. So if businesses want to reach out to her, so just to have them ready maybe to pass out if they look like anyone might need help, please contact Tessa Hernandez.
So how do they, how would, on the domestic violence, how would they call, get in touch with the Women's Forum? How do they do that?
I know the Women's Forum number is 323-686-2493, but the cards that she has have 3 or 4 numbers that you can text or call.
Okay.
And then there's a couple websites too.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to say really quick, sorry, I forgot 2 people that were instrumental in getting details for the census. Herlinda Chico from Supervisor Hahn's office, and Clayton Hurd from Congressman Lowenfeld's office. So thank you to them as well.
Yeah, great.
I probably should have asked Captain Hawking this question when you were at the podium earlier, so I apologize, but could we just have a brief reminder about drones in town? I understand that technically you're supposed to have an FAA license to be flying drones. However, it's kind of a new exciting craze. And specifically what I'm alluding to is there are more drones flying in town, and there are more drones in what some would view is in other people's personal and private space. Can you just talk a little bit about what we've addressed in council meetings past?
Sure. I have to admit, I'm not an expert on drones, and I know what we do here at the city. The sheriff's department works with the fire department, and Dan will send out a thing where if somebody wants to fly a drone over the city for filming, he puts it out to make sure that the sheriff's department's not bringing over helicopters, that it's not going to interfere with anything in the harbor and so forth. My understanding is you don't need an FAA license to fly one. However, there is concerns if you're flying it right over somebody's backyard and they're out there sunbathing or whatever it might happen to be. So I think you can always call the sheriff's department, and we can always go out there and contact them depending on what the circumstances is. If they're out there getting pictures of the casino, that's a little bit different than they're flying it right over your backyard. So anytime there's any type of disturbance or something that's invading your privacy, call us and we will go out there and contact them. That's easy for us to do, and it solves the problem at the time. And we've got calls like that before, and when we do get calls like that, the people are pretty cooperative. They're all, no, I didn't mean to be doing that, even though they're flying it right over. We go, well, you need to move, you need to go. And we don't cite them, we don't take the drone as evidence, we don't do that, but we work very closely with the fire department on that too.
Well, how do
Mike,
you
did you have
even find
anything
out
else?
who owns them?
Yeah, that was my question.
I'm sorry, say again?
How do you find out who owns them?
Well, we can use it, they're gonna be out there with the controller and so forth flying it.
There's one flying over my head. He could be living, or she could be living 3 blocks away, and how would I know?
Yeah,
I've been wanting to find out who's been flying that one drone, because I want him to go down the alleys and get people that they're not picking up their dog poop. But the guy hasn't come, he or she has not come forward. So.
Did you want to, let me see if Mike would like to add anything else.
Okay. Scott?
In my experience, like a lot of things, there's 2 different kinds of people that operate very responsibly and people that don't. We both take calls routinely where people will call and ask if there's any kind of restrictions, and we just say that there's no restrictions beyond what the FAA requires. They can't operate near the heliport or the airport, and if there's any kind of emergency aircraft operations, whether fire department or law enforcement, then that's when we have the ability to shut it all down. However, trying to find a drone operator can prove very difficult.
Right.
So we just try to encourage people to use the drones responsibly, respect people's privacy, maintain clearance from the heliport especially.
Okay, that's good. And Scott, did you have something to add to that?
Cities' power to regulate drones is somewhat limited by the FAA. We can do it if they impede local law enforcement, firefighters, or emergency responders. There's a white paper put out by the League of California Cities a couple years ago on what cities can do, and I provided that to Mike Palmer, and so if you'd like that, he can make a copy of that and put it in your inboxes for you to look at during your spare time.
Okay.
And I believe we provided a memo to council in the last year or two.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to revisit it, because I wasn't sure my facts were correct, that you needed an FAA license, but, I mean, really it boils down to common courtesy. Please don't be flying over people's balconies and hovering. It's just kind of, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then the other item is for the council to sort of discuss and talk about. Historically, in years past, I only went back several years, but in years past, we have not had a second council meeting in November. And this year, I know there are a couple of us who are either volunteering or potentially working or doing things during election night on November 3rd. So rather than have a limited council agenda on November 3rd, I'd like to float the idea of having a full, proper council meeting for the second Tuesday of the month on the 10th. And rather than a short meeting on the 1st and potentially not one on the 17th, but I would like to propose that we combine our business and do it on the second meeting so that city staff can also, for their part of it, focus on election night and the couple days leading up to that. So just an idea, if there's any.
And then we'd only have one meeting that
And we would
month.
have just the one meeting still.
My question is, just with knowing what needs to happen with regular city business, does that seem to work for you all? I'm more concerned about them than us.
Well, I think in past elections that we have had a meeting on election night, and the second meeting in November when it's the same week of Thanksgiving has been canceled, but we are up for whatever council proposes.
It doesn't much matter to me.
I would be happy if we did that, whether it's to move it to the 10th or have it even on the 17th. I know, I think Thanksgiving is a week later, so it actually is not the same week as Thanksgiving this year, which it's a lot later in the month. Date-wise, I think.
How about if we move it to the second week?
Yeah.
And then we make the decision if we need to have the second meeting
the next week.
In regards to if there's business that needs to be taken care of.
So how many weeks between October, whatever?
I think it's 3 weeks.
Oh, it's just 3 weeks again?
Which we do, I think, 3 times a year already.
So it would be the 20th and then
So it'd be 4 weeks then?
It would be 20 days.
No, yeah, the 20th and then the 10th.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
That gives us plenty of opportunity to get it out to the public as well.
Okay, so we will be canceling November 3rd for the election, and then we will schedule it for Tuesday, November 10th as a regular city council meeting, which we will advertise. And then, depending on that evening, if staff is recommending, because we have a lot of business, that we would have it the following Tuesday on the 17th.
On the 17th.
Great. And that's all I had.
Okay. And Scott, you don't see any problem with this?
No, I do not. Many cities are doing the same thing.
Okay. I was trying to catch you. Catalina Kid Ventures is going to be having a pumpkin patch on October 15th downtown. I don't know if it's been finalized on the beach or on the stage, whatever. But you can purchase your pumpkin. I'm not sure of the price yet. They're also going to do a little setup, so if you want to, you can take a picture with your children and that kind of thing. So that's on the 15th, and it's our only fundraiser this year. Minutes with the mayor is tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and I will have a special guest coming tomorrow, so tune in. I had my virtual SCAG meeting last week, and it's just really interesting how you hire consultants for everything, and they come up, anyway. It was all about the future of offices and workers, and so much of it is pretty much like we would all guess. You know, some of the people are going to go back in and some of the people aren't. And the work at home, it's just, they also talk about mobility trends and that kind of thing. And I think the mobility is already coming back to a lot of those places. But anyway, it was just kind of stuff that you would kind of know. And if we sat around the room and kind of brainstormed. But then there's also how to change space, and that's, of course, going to be an issue with not so much for Avalon, but when you're talking about skyscrapers in New York and downtown LA, and, you know, just how they're going to have to reconfigure, and I'm so glad we live here, I guess is the bottom line to all of that. Then they also talked a little bit about the regional planning stuff, which I know you get, and them going out to the communities and working on regional plans and that kind of stuff, because they're funding part of our general plan, are they not? We're getting funding for our general plan revision update?
We're getting a little bit of money for an update to the housing element, which we were approved for, but not on the...
Not on the actual, okay, so they may be coming through with some money in the future. So anyway, that was that. The league, yes, I've also signed up. I have a list. The main activities are like Thursday. Thursday's a pretty fun-filled day. And I don't know if we have room in the conference room, but I've got a sign-in number. Lisa has a sign-in number, and you have a number too. So if you wanted to partner up, instead of registering, you could take a look at this and say, oh, this one sounds good to me, and then you could take notes on it, because there's a lot of good stuff. So, Michael, could you give Yesenia a list of the workshops? Is that possible, like you gave me, or?
I can send out the link with all of the workshops to council.
Okay, then if any of them sound good, and I don't know if the conference room is booked, but if it's on...
I believe Devin has already sent that out to every council member.
Oh, did she? Okay, and the list of all that, okay, all right. I don't know, Cindy, were you going to participate a little bit?
I'm not this year.
Okay, but if there's anything that's interesting, I can give you my code, and if I'm not going to use it, you can do it.
I'll have a look for Thursday. I'm not available, but...
Okay, excellent. So I was kind of surprised when I was looking at something you sent out about the number of people that are retiring, and we know some of them that have. But is that confidential information to know the employees that are retiring? I mean, we know of the chief in April, but there are people that are leaving. Rick Spruill, I guess his last day was today.
Today, Dudley Moran's
Dudley Moran, and we don't know these things. So how do I say, congratulations, good luck, whatever, when I run in, we don't know who's leaving the ranks, and so it'd be nice to know that.
Well, Annie, all I can say is that when they're sitting in front of me and I ask if I can share that information and they tell me no, I don't share that.
Well, at least then we could give us, okay, but hadn't you give us, when they get down to the wire like that, send out a little note to say, Dudley's last day is da-da-da-da? I mean, if that's not even good, I mean, you don't have to give me 3 months' notice, but...
Certainly, Mayor.
Yeah, it would be nice, because I don't know who all is now missing, and between just the layoffs and for the part-timers and the people that have retired, it would just kind of be nice to know whatever we could know.
Okay.
Whatever information would be.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Another quick question. So, how many times does... you go on a smoke alarm call and it's a false alarm, and then you go on a smoke alarm call at the same place and it's a false alarm. What's the ruling on false alarms?
Well, there's a difference between a false alarm and a malicious alarm. When the alarm goes off because there's smoke in the kitchen, even though it's an accidental activation because they've been cooking, that's not their fault. The system is doing what it's supposed to do.
Right.
So where a malicious alarm, where somebody has pulled a fire alarm where the system keeps going off because they haven't maintained it properly and it's sending out false alarms. That's where we get into, there's a tiered system for first offense, second offense, third offense.
Okay.
So-
In a year's time or in a month's time?
Usually what happens is that whether it's a Hamilton Cove unit or a hotel, they don't want their guests woken up at 2 in the morning repeatedly because the alarm keeps going off. So typically, Hamilton Cove is a good example where they're changing out the smoke detectors to heat detectors. So for example, in the kitchen, where it's typical that there'd be smoke while somebody's cooking, they change that one out to a heat detector so they don't get so many accidental activations.
Right.
But we don't charge for that because the system is doing what it's supposed to do.
Right, okay. As I have a scanner, and it's kind of interesting to hear all of the alarms.
It's kind of the, what is it, when, we know that things are getting busy when we start going to Hamilton Cove more often because of some of those alarms.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. And just one other thing, with all of the changes, and the dust is still settling, but some kind of a reorganization of who's on first, who's on second, who's going where, because I know there's going to be changes here starting tomorrow.
Yes, that was one of the things I'm reporting out to you.
Okay, never mind.
But I will definitely provide to the council who's doing what once we've...
Okay. Because we'd like to support the people, especially as they change in their roles and that kind of thing. So that would be nice. And then there's that S7, and Michael, whoever wants to speak to that, there's that repower meeting with Southern California Edison on the 8th. Is this the big public one, or is just this the one that we got notifications on?
This is the public one. They're going to be presenting the feasibility study on their findings for alternative energy to the public. So they'll be talking about that at quite a depth, beginning at, I believe it's 5 o'clock on the 8th.
Do you have the what they call in on, or what is it, repower something, huh?
I registered. I have a link. I can send that out if you're interested, Mayor. I also downloaded the copy of the report, and I can forward that to council if interested.
I know it's a huge report. I'm just curious how they're getting the word out to everybody else, to participate.
I know they've sent a couple different messages out. Adeline Yoon, their government relations, has reached out, and they've sent out several emails and other communications.
Okay.
And it's been on Facebook for the last
Yeah, it's really easy to register.
2 weeks.
Then they send you the email right away.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, they're infringing on my town hall, but
I was
that's
going to say,
okay.
is that the same time?
Oh, yeah.
Too.
Well, okay.
They were going to come this evening and do a presentation, but when we had to reschedule the budget meeting for this evening, and I advised them, they decided to punt it to the next meeting, and now they've changed it to a different presentation.
Okay, all right. All right, that's all for me. So, city manager.
Well, I just wanted to, we are expanding city hall hours starting, tomorrow. We are going to try, advertise to the public, because we are really going to try to adhere, because we have employees that are absorbing a few jobs, that vehicles would be in the morning from 8 to 12, and in the afternoon would be our commuter subsidy. Obviously, if I came in and I said, oh, I'm getting on the boat and I need my commuter subsidy now, of course, we always try to accommodate our residents when we can. So that would be Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5, and closed between 12 and 1. The guideline that we had provided to you for the RFP for the fuel dock has been altered a little bit, and I'll be providing that to you, because once we really got into the RFP, there was so many things to consider that we want to make sure that it's very thorough. So it's not on the timeline that was in the staff report. I've also drafted a letter to Southern California Edison requesting relief on our utility bills. I thought, what the heck, I'll try there too.
Yes.
And then I already mentioned the letter to the assembly member and to the state senator.
Great, okay. Perfect. Okay, Michael? Did you have anything to report?
You already did.
Sorry, I reported out. Mostly it was planning news, but yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and Scott, anything?
Nothing to report tonight.
Okay, if there's no further business, we want to say, Tony, we can't wait to see you in November, and good evening. Meeting adjourned.